A violent burst of flame erupted from Alucard's palms, sweeping across the battlefield and enveloping the colossal bear in crackling crimson fire. The explosion was brutal, especially at such close range. It didn't just deal damage, it devoured. The fire struck the beast square in the face. Reborn! The bear's agonized roar tore through the air, vibrating in Alucard's skull. It thrashed wildly, claws carving furrows into the ground in desperation. But Alucard clung on with grim determination, jaw clenched, teeth visibly cracked, both hands gripping his sword like a lifeline. As the fire consumed the monster, it had no chance to fight back. It could only suffer. But victory came at a cost. The smell hit him first: burnt fur, scorched meat, the stench of death. Then, something worse. The flames had climbed, creeping up his legs, licking his sides, dancing across his torso, until they crowned his head like a blazing halo. Fire was his greatest weakness. He had effectively set himself ablaze. A suicidal gamble. And yet, he wasn't burning. The flames curled around him like a warm breeze. No pain, no screaming flesh. Even his silver hair shimmered, untouched. The fire illuminated his face like a living torch, casting his blood-red eyes in an eerie glow. And then he smiled, madly. Triumph surged through his veins like molten steel. Ha! It worked. No wow dai. With both arms trembling, torn and bloodied, he raised his flaming sword from the beast's skull and plunged it down with everything he had, straight into the gaping wound. It split through bone, meat, and mind. The final blow. Ayo! The dying bear let out a final, fading cry before collapsing in a heap. Its massive frame struck the earth like a fallen mountain. Alucard, still clutching his sword, couldn't move in time. The weight of the beast took him down with it. He was flung from his sword and crashed onto the grassy, mud-soaked terrain. His body skidded until it came to a halt, lying flat on his back, staring at the fractured moon above. His face twisted into a bloodied smile. I did it," he whispered, letting out a strained chuckle despite the searing pain engulfing his body. He was a wreck, skin torn, blood vessels ruptured, teeth hanging by threads. He had pushed himself beyond his limits. In game terms, that bear was at least 10 to 15 levels higher. A fair fight? Not even close. One swipe should have been enough to kill him. His knowledge of rebirth had always felt like a novelty, useless in real life. But today it had saved his life. Still, the risks he had taken were reckless. Especially the last one. Casting a fire spell at point-blank range when fire was his Achilles heel? That was madness. In Rebirth, self-inflicted spell damage was negligible. Players were resistant to their own mana. But this world wasn't a game. Alucard hadn't known if that rule would apply. He'd gambled everything, and had paid off. He had no idea why. Maybe it was part of the game's lore. Maybe friendly fire was off by design, but mana resistance was embedded deeper in the system. Who knew? Alucard didn't care. He was alive. Suddenly, the flames coating his body flickered out. The beast, now a blackened husk a few meters away, let out its final death rattle. Plus 500 XP. Level up. Level up. Congratulations. You have reached the requirements to unlock the Battle Mage class. Would you like to unlock it? Yes, not now. Blurry text danced in front of his eyes, but he could still make out the glowing prompts. His smile widened. Perfect. Not just 2 level ups, but a class he'd been aiming for since day one. Battle Mage. An alternate path to the traditional wizard class. While wizards channeled destructive power from afar, battle mages wove spells into close-quarters combat. Quick, explosive bursts. Enhanced buffs. Ideal for a hybrid fighter like Alucard. To unlock it, you had to eliminate either 1 high-level enemy or 10 weaker ones using a spell at point-blank range. Well, he'd done that. And more. The system seemed to mirror Rebirth's mechanics exactly, but a gnawing doubt remained. Would that consistency last? Did the rest of this world even see the system the way he did? He closed his eyes, let himself breathe, then opened them, gaze fixed on the option in front of him. Yes, he tapped it mentally. Before he could distribute his new stat points, a voice cried out, shrill, emotional, and borderline hysterical. MYYYYLORRD. I'm so happy you're okay. Sniffle, sniffle, when you were on fire. I thought you were going to die. Luck hurled himself forward, clinging to Alucard like a sobbing child, tears soaking into his soot-covered cheeks. Ow! Alucard winced. For once, he didn't mind Luck's dramatic affection. It was comforting. Heh, thanks. But ease up, you're grinding my bones. And seriously, what were you worried about? I was never in danger. I was fine. Suddenly, all the pain he'd suppressed came flooding back in a single, overwhelming wave. His body spasmed. Vision blurred. Every wound screamed. His awareness began to fade. And my lord, hang in there. I'll heal you. Just hold on. Through the haze, he glimpsed a shimmering, golden figure, wings fractured, aura flickering, flapping above him. A fairy, a healer. Dark energy washed over him like a warm blanket. And then, everything went black. Slowly, Alucard forced his eyelids apart, vision swimming in a haze. The world spun like a broken compass. Instinct urged him to rub the blur from his eyes, but his body refused to cooperate. It felt like his limbs belonged to someone else. Every twitch required effort. Every movement, a small victory. When he finally blinked his sight clear, a rough, rocky ceiling greeted him, familiar in a way that made his thoughts stumble. The soft pop of flames crackled nearby, their glow flickering warmly against the stone. He lay still, oddly calm, letting the ambient noise ground him. Where am I? What was I doing? His mind groped through the fog for answers. And then something small, bright, and blubbering slammed into his face. My lord, you're awake. I was so scared. A teary, purple-haired fairy, Luck, clung to his cheek, sobbing into his skin with glittery wetness. You wouldn't wake up, and I couldn't feel a pulse, and I thought, well, you're already technically dead, but not like dead. And the words poured out like an overflowing bucket. Alucard tried to follow, but his brain had already tuned out the noise. Luck was repeating himself, unraveling the same thread again and again. Still, the sentiment, it touched him more than he expected. No one had ever worried for him like this. Not since his father. A bittersweet smile crept across his face. It was my fault, Luck wailed. I chipped my wing and couldn't run, and the bear caught up and... Chill. Alucard lifted a heavy finger and pressed it gently across the fairy's mouth. Don't beat yourself up. You did great, Luck. You dragged me to safety, cleaned me up. Without you, I'd probably be ash by now. He smiled faintly. Besides, that bear would have shown up eventually. All I did was return the favor. We're even now. Luck sniffled, then brightened like someone had flipped a switch inside him. His tiny form shimmered. Okay, if you say so, then we're even. I'm really glad you're okay. Me too. Alucard gave him a nod, then glanced around. The cave was small, cramped really. A makeshift fire danced at its center. Sunlight filtered through a narrow exit, casting long streaks of warmth across the cold stone. Not the same cave he'd made home, but the one he'd once hidden in. He guessed Luck had dragged him here rather than hauling his weight all the way back. Looking down, he noticed his armor was cleaned, though still scuffed and cracked. Another point for Luck. Where's the bear? He asked. Right outside. Same spot you left it. And how long was I out? Just a few hours. The sun only rose recently. Got it. With effort, Alucard rolled to his side and pushed himself upright, bones creaking like rusted metal. He stretched as best he could before limping toward the mouth of the cave, toward the sun. Vampire. Sunlight. Mortal enemy. Any other man would have balked. But Alucard, he was curious. The game mechanics had followed him into this world so far. Would this be any different? He extended a finger into the beam of light. No smoke. No sizzle. No dramatic explosion of dust. Encouraged, he slowly slid his arm forward. That's when it hit him. The weight. Like someone had tied bricks to his bones. His arm felt impossibly heavy, dragging his balance sideways until... Thud! He collapsed out of the cave's shade, directly into the sun. Pant. What the hell? This is way worse than the game. The sunlight didn't just weaken him, it crushed him, flattened him. His energy drained like water down a sink. He could barely think, let alone move. My lord, are you okay? Luck zipped to his side, perfectly fine under the sun, which only made Alucard feel worse. In Rebirth, daytime was a manageable inconvenience. Here, it was practically a death sentence. He couldn't imagine fighting like this. Even a low-level thief could kill him before lunch. This was the first time he truly felt the curse of being a vampire. The blue sky, the warm sun, the serene morning, all beautiful, all hostile. Desperate to alleviate the strain, Alucard opened his stat screen. 10 unassigned points. He hovered over resistance. It would help. It always helped in the game. But no, he wasn't going to butcher his build for the sake of convenience. He dumped the points into physical attack and agility. Not optimal, but consistent. Yet the sun still pinned him like a bug under glass. Tisich, he clenched his teeth. Only one option left. He stripped completely naked. Luck had seen worse. Modesty wasn't a luxury he could afford right now. Surprisingly, it helped. Slightly. With effort, he stood. He scanned the sun-bleached terrain. The bear's corpse lay nearby, nestled in a patch of shade beneath a tree. Luck, scout ahead. I don't want to die now that I've lived. On it, sir. The fairy zipped off like a shooting star. Bit by bit, Alucard limped toward the tree. The shade was a godsend, just enough relief to move. A mechanic the game had promised to add, but never did. Reaching the corpse, he wasted no time. He bit into its neck and drank. The blood was warm, metallic, and bitter. Not nearly as satisfying as he'd hoped. Maybe it was because it had cooled. Or maybe blood degraded with time in this world. Another test for another day. He wiped his mouth and retrieved his blade from the bear's skull. Then, awkwardly, began carving it apart. He wasn't a butcher, and it showed. But he managed to hack out several chunks of meat, which he tossed toward the cave. Food, resources, maybe even currency, if the pelt held any value. Once he was done, he prepared for another trial by fire. I can do this, he told himself, steeling his resolve. He crouched, gathered all the strength he could, and leapt. Plop! He barely made it a few feet before falling flat again. The sun dragged at him like gravity had tripled. He clawed his way back to the cave, armor abandoned. To anyone else, the grassy path might have seemed idyllic. Peaceful. Birds chirped. Leaves rustled. To Alucard, it was a gauntlet of torment. When he finally crossed the threshold and collapsed into the shade, it felt like he'd survived a war. He lay on his back, breath shallow. His mind drifted. He was weak, inexperienced. He didn't know how this world worked, not truly. The people, the politics, the powers. He needed to get stronger. He needed to learn. Returning to his original cave was the next step. Grind levels, unlock classes, learn spells, gather intel. But that could wait. Right now, he needed only one thing. A nap sounds really nice right about now. And with that, the would-be vampire lord, half-naked and completely drained, drifted into the comfort of darkness once more.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Sometime later, underneath the light of the full moon, torches in hand, to see through the darkness of the night, were two armored men. They seemed to be taking things slowly, carefully looking wherever they could as they traversed through the grass. Nothing but the sound of the cold wind, crickets, and their own footsteps entering their ears as they began whispering in a low voice. Henlo, this is so weird. All of those broken trees are not normal. Where did all of the beasts go? Wasn't this forest full of them? I've barely seen any. Hell, I've barely heard even a sound. Well, there was an attack on a city near here not too long ago. I wouldn't be surprised if the beasts ran away or are in hiding. But wouldn't we have seen them on the way? They must have gone somewhere, right? Doesn't really matter. This just makes it easier for us. They were never even our objective anyways. Remember, we are only here for the Forest Guardian. No way he would ever leave this forest for some attackers. Yeah, I guess. But it's still pretty off. Asterisk sigh, asterisk, just shut up and follow me. There's a cave up ahead. From the look of it, I have a feeling this might be where he's at. If you're acting like this, why did you take up this job knowing all the dangers? I'm just a simple magic caster in need of some money. I've been in debt for a long time now due to Magic Academy. For the difficulty, this was the best paying job I've seen at the guild in a very long time, so I decided to take it with the team. Other than money, why are you doing this? Fame? Recognition? Power? Henlo suddenly stopped and once again took a deep breath before he continued forward, leading the way towards the dark cave. That's where you and I differ. Your motivations are shallow and selfish. Mine go much deeper. My daughter has been really sick for the past month. Her mother already passed away due to that same sickness, and it was all because I wasn't able to secure money for a healer. Curse those damn temples and their unreasonable prices. You know, I have a few healing spells in my arsenal. I might be able to do something to help. Idiot. First, that would be highly illegal. And second, if it were that simple, I wouldn't be this desperate. This isn't like a mere scratch or sickness. This is an expensive treatment that might need some offerings. Wow. I'm sorry, man. I'm just trying to help. Henlo once again took a deep breath and rubbed his fingers on his temples. Yeah, I get that. Thanks for the offer. I didn't mean to snap like that. It's okay. I can only imagine how stressful this must all be on you. Yeah. He looked down with a sad gaze before looking back up once again, peering straight into the dark abyss-like cave. Okay. Remember, we're only here to scout. The bear might well be in there, probably sleeping, so lower the brightness of your torch. Keep your guard up and expect the unexpected. Once we confirm the bear's location, we need to quickly get out of here and report to the leader. I don't want to hear a single peep from you, okay? Yeah, I know. You don't have to tell me. Dampen. The man held his staff with more confidence than ever before, casting a spell that reduced the sound of footsteps. Good. Now follow me. The cave was extremely big and rather damp, a testament to the bear's might and size. Yet that did not deter them at all. Carefully, they walked in the dark brown cave, making sure to stay as quiet as possible by avoiding certain terrain and especially puddles. Their entire focus was on the path ahead and on their task at hand. They even managed to filter out the sound of their own heavily beating heart. The cave felt endless, like it spanned forever, yet that was simply all in their mind. It had not even been a minute since they had entered. That was when a massive drop of water splashed on the man's face who was trailing behind, which startled him enough to snap out of focus and look up. That was when he saw it, something he had only seen in his nightmares. A pair of glowing, blood-red eyes piercing through the dark and staring into his very being like a predator ready to pounce. His eyes immediately became shaky and his legs and bladder began to fail him. Die. Henlo suddenly heard an ear-piercing cry enter his ears and echo throughout the entire cave. Idiot! What the hell was that? I told you T-dash. His words were cut off short as he turned around to a horrible sight. A sight that filled him with more dread than he could ever remember, as his heart immediately sank down to his stomach. There he saw the corpse of his ally, his body slightly dried up, a puddle of blood underneath him extending up to his lifeless eyes and neck that had a clear bite mark. At a simple glance, he knew what it was, but by that time, it was far too late. His slight hesitation and unexpected shock led to his inevitable demise. Scrinch. Abruptly, a sudden pain emerged from his stomach, a numb feeling that only sunk in once he looked down to see a bloody blade thrust right through him. Vampire. The blade felt like it was stuck in his abdomen forever. The pain was absolutely unbelievable. Yet, he still refused to give up after he had gotten this far. If he did, what kind of father would he be? Key arts, sunlight slash. With all the energy he could muster, he pulled out his sword from its scabbard, and it immediately lit up in a flame-like light. Now you die, monster! He yelled a demonic shriek of anger and determination before his happiness was immediately crushed by another, even brighter light. Ahead of him emerged a small, flying and glowing figure that exploded into a massive blast of light right in front of his eyes, essentially blinding him. My eyes! He yelled out in agony, his hands tightly holding his burning eyes as he threw up buckets of blood on the ground from the sword still stuck in his stomach. That was some move you got there. It's quite interesting indeed. I've never seen anything like it. Care to explain it to me? What was it? The vampire finally spoke, his voice as cold and distant as ever as he pulled his blade out of his opponent's body, watching as he dropped to the ground, screaming in agony, heavily breathing. You monster! Cough, stay away from me. Stay away. Where did all that confidence go? What's going on? If you have any shred of humanity left in you, please let me go. I promise to never do this again. I have a family waiting for me at home. My daughter needs me. The vampire seemed quite perplexed. That's quite shameless of you. I'm not sure you understand what's happening. You are the ones that walked into my domain, uninvited, are you not? If I were the one in your position, would you have let me go if I begged and pleaded? Would you have turned a blind eye and looked the other way? I don't think so. You would have captured me alive or sold me for a bargain, all to save your precious little daughter. Am I wrong? If so, then please enlighten me. Who here is the real monster? That was when Henlo truly broke, as he began to cry tears of blood and softly laugh at himself. Hey, don't cry. At least you're being honest with me. Look on the bright side. I left you alive because I knew you would be useful to me, unlike that sorry dead corpse in the back. I'll cut you a deal. You work with me for a bit, and I'll let you go free. What do you say? Ha ha ha. Liar. You're lying. I know a lie when I hear one. I won't tell you shit. I know I'm dead, but I won't sell out everyone else along with me. So be it. I honestly expected that answer. People in this world truly are built different. But that still doesn't change the outcome. Luck. Yes, my lord. Can you heal his eyes for me? Yes, certainly. That was when Henlo experienced the only sort of relief he felt for seemingly the longest time. Shards and sprinkles of pure bliss fell on his face and completely healed his previously blinded eyes, allowing him to see once more. But when he instinctively opened them, he wished he had still been blinded. There, for the first time, he saw the vampire's shining, fierce red eyes that stared deep into his soul with a brilliant and deadly glint. It was like true horror incarnate, yet he could not help but feel oddly lost in their eternal abyss with trembling eyes. So, care to tell me all you know and cooperate, old friend? He spoke with an odd smile that was seen from Luck's ambient light. Yeah, that won't be really a problem. What do you need to know and want me to do? Cough, cough, but first I might need some healing. The vampire's smile grew even wider, seeing what just transpired in front of him. That would be no problem. Friend, I see. Thanks for the help. The bear should be in that other cave. Sadly, I have important business to attend to, so I can't join you on the hunt. I don't need credit. You can have it. Don't tell your other friends about me. If you say you found it by yourself, then you'll get a bigger pay, right? It's for your sick daughter, so you need all the money you can get. Oh, you really are too kind. I don't know how I will ever repay you. Ha ha. Don't worry about it. We're friends, are we not? This is what friends do. And you should probably take Peter's dead body with you. The bats in this cave were really dangerous. Yes, of course. I'll take it back with me. If we meet again soon, I promise to give you something for all of your help. But for now, I'll have to go. Maybe my pay will be more now, since he's dead. Less reward money to go around, you know. Henlo, the now fully healed soldier, spoke with a mysterious glint in his eyes, a small chuckle, and a subtle pinkish-red shimmer almost unseen to the naked eye. He bowed gracefully to the tall, smiling man in front of him and the small fairy to his side before leaving with a lustrous torch in his hand. Good luck, friend. The man waved him off, a profound glint in his brilliant, blood-red eyes. It only took a few more seconds until his footsteps were no longer heard, and Alucard could finally stop pretending, his smile fading away. He was indeed happy that his skill functioned as intended, yet he could not help but feel disgusted at the same time. My lord, is that man really your friend? Luck asked with genuine curiosity, which even managed to break Alucard's iron gaze and make him break out into tears. Ha 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 ha. However, he quickly stopped and calmed his nerves before responding. Of course he's not my friend. I trust no one. Even the most pure and innocent of people are probably not what you expect. People are always fake. Backstabbing and betrayal are always in people's nature. If they see an opportunity to manipulate you, they will use it. If I've ever learned something in life, is that you can only rely on yourself, and true friendship and love are harder to come by than a nun in a strip club. At least to me. I sure haven't found it yet. He softly chuckled at himself. But, my lord, am I not someone you trust? Luck nervously spoke, making Alucard ponder for a few seconds before responding. Don't worry, Luck. I trust you, but I don't see you as my friend just yet. But you're definitely the best person I've met in a very long time. It's quite an achievement. He decided to be mostly honest. It's okay, my lord. I fully understand. We've only met a few days ago after all. I promise to prove my loyalty and good nature to you more in the future. Humph, he smiled again. I still think calling me Lord is a little annoying and over the top, but do what makes you happy, I guess. Thank you, my lord. He bowed before continuing. Anyways, if that man was not your friend, then why were you acting that way towards him? Alucard took a deep breath before responding. Simple. I charmed him with my new vampiric eyes of charm. It was much easier for me to do it considering the state he was in. Charm and domination are not the same. Doing this, I don't get complete control over him. The skill simply makes me seem like a good friend in his eyes, so I had to play along. He wouldn't do anything for me that he wouldn't do for a good friend. I see. That's really cool. It all makes sense now. Luck flew around with excitement, only to see his lord slowly approach the mouth of the cave. My lord, where are we going? The charm effect will only last for 30 more minutes or so. We need to move fast if we want to reach the next cave and hide. I see. Do you have something in mind, my lord? Luck asked curiously as they exited the cave and were once again face to face with the bleak nighttime forest. Yes, indeed I do. I've gotten a decent amount stronger hunting these past few days, but I still think I'm fairly weak. I may not be able to fight all head-on, but I can certainly try other means. It was a shame I couldn't finish my meal a few minutes ago. I had to cut my feast early in that cave. For the past few days, I've been craving human blood. I haven't felt normal since. Beast blood was never the same. And it seems like I didn't even have to go searching for the meal. It just came right to me. The sky's still pitch black. Nothing but the sound of odd beast cries, the wind, and crickets filling the air. Small shakiness was spotted in the bushes. And out of those bushes emerged various men, light along with completely armed with a mixture of excitement and seriousness on their faces. This one, the Guardian, is in this cave. Henlo, along with a group of armed men, ran out of the forest and into a small, muddy clearing. At the front of the 5 men was a man that clearly stood out. Red, scruffy hair rigidly hung over his scarred, chiseled face. Clear brown eyes sat wickedly within their sockets as he peered deeply into that sorry excuse for a cave. His eyebrows were furrowed and his hands were placed firmly playing with his crimson beard. He stood towering over his men, seeming almost an entire foot taller. He wore standard yet pristine-looking armor with what seemed like a bastard sword hung firmly around his waist. And something that could not have been so easily missed was the silver plate hanging off his neck like a dog tag, standing out compared to the bronze and iron ones from the people all around him. There was nothing alluring to his look and demeanor. He seemed like a confident warlord right to his core. Henlo, doesn't that cave seem rather small to house the Guardian? The beast itself is not as big as the rumors said. I confirmed it with my own eyes. You sound quite confident. I trust you. I've known you long enough to do that. Sir, do you think that we should just blast spells from the outside and take it out? Another man spoke from the back. No, that would be stupid. All the attacking spells you people know are fire spells. Anyone knows that charred skin goes for much less on the market. It's best we lure the beast out into the open, and you just use your buffing spells to boost me and Henlo, as we're the only good melee fighters here. Despite his look and deep voice, the leader seemed to be quite analytical and well thought out. Yes, sir. Understood. The man went back into his position and backed off from the leader and Henlo at the front. Henlo, how deep is the cave exactly? It was at least half a kilometer, sir. It's very long. If I were to go in and lure it out, I doubt I would make it out alive. I'm definitely not fast enough. Henlo responded with a hint of disappointment and frustration. I'll do it, sir. I'm the fastest on the team. I'm an assassin. I rarely ever lose in a contest of speed. Raymond, another man, showed up from behind, cloaked in black and wearing abnormally light cloth armor. We don't know the speed of this beast. It could very well be too much for us to handle in speed. The leader once again took some time to ponder, rubbing his hands on his thick, scruffy beard. You support mages, wait around the beginning to the middle section of the cave, give Raymond an initial speed boost as he goes in, and by the time he comes out and you see him again, cast your other speed spell that only lasts a few seconds. It should just about give him enough time to exit. So, Raymond, what do you think about that? Does this sound good for you? He chuckled with confidence. I personally don't think I need the assistance, but if you insist on it, boss, I'll do it. Plus, I don't want this to backfire as much as all of you, so I'll get this over with quick. We all need the money. But you all have to be ready for when I come out with the beast. Yes, of course, don't worry. The leader nodded with confidence, holding onto the hilt of his sword. I'll cut it down as soon as I see it. Me and Henlo will be waiting for you all outside. Got it. Raymond smiled, stretching himself before he walked up to the start of the cave, mouthing off seemingly inaudible words in a low voice that made his body glow different colors before he dashed with only a small light source in hand, the mages following behind, waiting towards the entrance of the cave. As told, Henlo and the leader remained outside, a fighting stance taken with their hands over their blades. That was when suddenly they all heard a crash inside the cave, or more like a small thump, that was followed up by a loud echo from within. What the fuck? This cave's empty, and there's no beast in here at all? Henlo, what is the meaning of this? The leader roared in outrage, a cold, thick killing intent from his gaze, stabbing daggers at the clearly confused Henlo. I really don't know. I swear I checked it when I came. GRPH, he scoffed, and looked away from the shivering Henlo and redirected his gaze back at the cave. Raymond, you and the others come back out. We have much to discuss. Yes, sir. Right away. The response was quick and sharp, yet what followed was even quicker, sharper, and stabbed deeper. I'm sorry, but this was the last discussion you will ever have. A raw, distant voice softly entered their ears and slowly made its way down their spines. Something was clearly off, and before they even had the chance to turn around, they witnessed as various spears of ice were flung from where the voice came, hitting directly above the cave. Not too long after the impact, the entire cliffside began shaking immensely, and everything began tumbling down, rocks falling like cats and dogs. What's happening? Naya, plus 45 XP, plus 60 XP, plus 80 XP. The entire cave collapsed on top of all of them, a mountain of rubble and smoke now in place of where the cave once stood. And, watching the dust cloud with a gaping mouth and wide-open eyes were the bewildered leader of the group and the heavily sweating, ghost-like Henlo. It was all so sudden and unbelievable. But who did that? You coward! And eventually, their shock led them to turn around, only to see who exactly did what they just witnessed. It was a man in gold-crest city guard armor that looked less than pristine. He wore a tightly fit helmet that did not well hide his ashen hair, and especially his predator-like, blood-red gaze that pierced through the deep darkness of the night. The sight of seeing him led to absolute outrage, yet a hint of hesitation from the leader who immediately recognized him and his race. Yet, in Henlo, all that seeing him incite was fear and disbelief unlike ever before, his face turning deathly pale as he mumbled, friend, is that you? The leader stood still, a mad, bone-chilling aura exuding out of his body as he turned around and stared daggers into Henlo's very soul. Henlo shuddered, damn near pissing his pants as the look of pure horror in his eyes multiplied staring at his leader's murderous gaze. Not in a no-no. Please, leader. And no, like her. This is all a misunderstanding. I would not betray you. I have a sick daughter at home who needs me. I have no reason to-. Those were his last words before his head rolled on the ground like a watermelon, the ugliest, most desperate, tear-filled expression imaginable as blood gushed out of his neck like a sprinkler, Alucard opening his mouth to grab a slight taste of the incoming rain. Yum, haha. Alucard slurped the red blood, a sensation intensifying inside him. Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I don't want to ever hear another word come out of your mouth. I thought you were my friend. I thought you were a brother to me. But no, you were a traitor. A filthy fucking traitor. He spat at his bleeding dead corpse, his teeth clenched, breathing out like a wild bull as he began to show signs of madness. And you're next. Monster, what provoked you to do this? Your kind is not from around here. He unsheathed his massive greatsword that was hung on his back and raised it facing towards his opponent. Who me? I am simply defending myself against attackers who invaded my home. So if you be so kind, save me some time and surrender your blood to me. There was a mad glow in his eyes, almost like that of a primal beast as he licked his lips, exposing his elongated fangs. Attacked your home, raped and tortured your family. Whatever excuse you give, true or not, I don't care. All I know is that demons like you should be exterminated from the face of the earth no matter what. You are the enemies of mankind. I will cut you down. Screw the protector of the forest. Your head shall make more than enough to make up for it. With vigor and passion in his eyes, he thrust his sword out forward with one hand, causing a massive gust of wind. Prepare yourself. Key arts. Enhance body. Limit break. Numb pain. His body glowed different colors as he screamed out his powers. And the vampire, Alucard, retaliated with spells of his own, enshrouding him with a different, more magical glow and aura than that of his opponent. Quick sprint. Minor strength boost. Bludgeoning resistance. In his right hand, the man threw his torch on the ground, both to create fire that the vampires hate, and to create a light source for his struggling eyes. Yet, it did not take long for the vampire to react, simply shooting ice spikes at the fire, fully extinguishing it. Of course, he fully expected that to transpire, and he didn't bother shield or defending the flames in the case of this, as he simply cast the only spell he knew, but a rather useful and rare one at that. Light of the Forest Wisp. Around him spawned a ball of light, shining the area all around him, yet did not at all remove his vision disadvantage completely against the dark-seeing demon of the night. Now die! The man who he now knew as Liker shouted, now grasping his greatsword with two hands, rushing straight at the vampire with clear outrage. He was quick and abnormally nimble on his feet, especially for a man wielding a greatsword. Alucard retaliated by firing Tier 2 and Tier 3 ice and fire spells at the oncoming attacker to no avail, as he simply avoided or outright blocked his attacks like they were nothing. That was when they came face to face, and the crazed Liker lifted his sword wide and slammed down with all of his might. Is this all a vampire can do? I expected greater. Yet, by doing so, it only left him wide open for a strike, which Alucard more than utilized to his advantage by stabbing him straight in the chest with a crazed, blood-craving smile. Blood splurted everywhere through his armor, but instead of the man staggering and tumbling back like he expected, he did not even flinch as he continued his strike that had death written all over it. Alucard's sword was stuck in his rock-hard abs, and the strike to his skull seemed all but imminent. Alucard had to resort to his new moves. Blood arts, limit burst. His body glowed a tint of bloody red, as a rush of energy overcame his body for a split second, allowing him to pull out his sword and roll away. Yet, as if his opponent had ultra instinct, he sensed his immediate movement and retaliated, switching his sword from a downwards slash to a sideways swing. GRGG. Was that his numb pain key arts? Growling. He coughed a mouth full of blood, the sound of his cracking bones filling his ears as he was sent flying and breaking a nearby tree. Luckily for him, he invested into bludgeoning resistance, for not for that he might have been dead. With hazy vision, he looked up, coughing and losing even more blood, in addition to expending his blood arts. Yet, his bleeding wound and shattered bones were the least of his concerns, as he could not control his near unquenchable thirst and urges. He had a plan in mind for victory, but he began to lose sight of it. All that he was able to focus on was that bloody wound dripping from Lyker's stomach and the body of Henlo still bleeding out on the ground. GRR like a primal beast. He clenched his teeth and roared, the glow in his eyes increasing as he held his sword tighter. He found his opponent already rushing at him, so he decided to retaliate head-on. Snare! Bind! His opponent's speed decreased suddenly, along with red mana binds surrounding him, which were immediately broken out of an instant later. Pathetic. I'll fucking kill you, demon. Clank clank. Are you really a swordsman? I expected much more from a vampire. What kind of sorry excuse for a swordsman are you? Ha ha ha. You kill my crew. Now I kill you. Die, 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 die. Luck was high above from the battlefield, his hands tightly on his heart as he could not believe what was happening. My lord, is that you? He had never seen Alucard act in such a way. He was way too reckless. Underneath him was not a noble battle of strength and will, but one of two beasts throwing their life away. His lord had a plan, but it seemed like the plan was immediately thrown at the window. Alucard had extracted much information from Henlo, including his leader's strengths and weaknesses, and one of them was that he possessed a blessing, a gift that allowed him to have a high natural perception, allowing him to perceive everything within a 3-meter radius around him. In simpler words, it raised the user's accuracy and evasion to the utmost limit. That was why Alucard decided on avoiding close combat at all cost, due to his lack of sword training and that devastating passive, and instead use his natural night vision advantage to easily poke at his weak spots from the shadows. That was also the reason why he decided to announce his appearance before he shot his ice shards to destroy the cave. He did it as a distraction tactic. If he didn't, then the leader might have intercepted the attacks and ruined his plans. My lord, what are you doing? You've been acting odd recently, but why have you gone against your plans and words? Is this a plan I don't understand? Or is it the vampiric urge for human blood? Luck watched from above as they both clashed from underneath him like wild beasts. His lord, Alucard, on the losing end of both power and strength as he continued to grow wilder and wilder. His eyes grew into tiny slits. His mouth unconsciously grew open as he kept on whispering things in a low voice. Limit burst, limit burst, limit burst. Veins were beginning to visibly form onto his injured body, and his mouth began salivating as his actions became wilder and wilder. Luck felt so helpless just standing up, watching his lord being insulted by a madman, on the losing end about to fall. However, he was afraid that he would prove to be even less than useless and get in the way instead of helping. The only moves he knew were healing, purification, and blinding flare, which might do more harm than good in such a case. He knew no attacking moves. You ruined me. You killed my whole team, my family, but I'm about to make a whole lot of money from you. Vampire scum, I'll make the most of this chance God has bestowed me. I'll end you. The mad roars of the man below snapped him out of his daze and inner thinking as he inwardly cursed. His lord was standing on his last legs, and he would be damned if he were to let him die while he sat idly by doing nothing. Limit burst, Alucard whispered once more, a bloody aura surrounding his feet as he lunged over towards his opponent, who smiled and deflected it like it was nothing, using the opportunity to kick him away. Cough, Alucard spat, what little blood he had remaining in his system. Breathing heavily with the glow in his eyes blazing and pulsating like a living heart, his vision died in red. He had no time to waste as his opponent proved to be relentless. Stop running, you bug. Fatal slash. His sword glowed a shimmering orange, and his moves became frantic. He was as rigid as a rhino and as graceful as a butterfly at the same time, completely going against the attack patterns he was used to. This was more than enough to catch the lacking Alucard off guard. Limit burst. He whispered once again, trying to dodge the attack, but he was far too slow. Although he managed to dodge most of the impact, yet what hit left him more than hurting. Cough. There was now a massive slash mark showing through his armor, one rather deep as blood began to pour out of it like a waterfall. He gritted his teeth and held his wounds, spitting out more blood as he fell down on one knee. only being held up by his sword. His blood-filled eyes were demonic red, were slowly growing blurrier, intently looking at the slight, blood-dripping wounds on his opponent's body. His breathing was frantic, and smoky particles were seen exiting from his mouth and nose. He looked more like a rabid dog or beast, hanging on to its last shreds of life. Slowly, Liker wiped off the blood from his bastard sword with a quick swipe, dyeing the grass underneath him red. He shifted his gaze on the wounded vampire who was clearly on his last legs and smiled, with a low chuckle that slowly got louder. "That's it. No more running, you little piece of shit. Your kind ruined my life before, and I'm not letting you do it again." Alucard tried to move, to lunge at that blood, but he was far too wounded. It was like his body was moving in slow motion. It was like he didn't recognize he was about to die. This is where it all ends. Demon scum. Die. Seemingly, it was all over. Liker's sword was slowly hurling towards Alucard's head, cutting through the wind like it was butter, until suddenly, "Get away from my lord, you monster!" "Ah, what the hell? Get off of my face!" Out of nowhere, there was now some sort of small, glowing mosquito hanging onto his face and punching his eyes. He missed his finishing blow on the still, unmoving vampire and lifted his hands toward his face to stop whatever was on it. "Go, my lord. Now it's your chance." Luck yelled, yet there was no response from Alucard. If only he knew that all his lord was able to hear was static. "I got you." Finally, Liker managed to catch that small bug, clenching it tightly with his right hand with an even wider smile. "A little fairy, are you with the vampire? Your kind is extremely rare. You'll sell for a fortune in the black market." Luck's life was being squeezed out of him, yet he still found the energy to speak. "Let go of me, you ugly pig, and stay away from my lord. Call me ugly again. I dare you. I won't kill. I'll leave you alive and knock you out. Be grateful, little fairy." He squeezed him tighter, only for Luck to bite him on the hand with all he had. He loosened his grip. "Goor, why you little? I'll." Blinding flare. The small fairy in his hands suddenly glowed with the intensity of 100 torches. Yet, Liker managed to close his eyes in time, due to his quick reaction, and since he was expecting such a thing. Yet, even still, the light penetrated his eyelids and caused massive pain. Pain enough for him to let Luck go, making him fall straight on the muddy grass. "Huh, why you little shit? I'll pop you like a balloon." He opened his now crying, bloodshot eyes and reached over towards the desperate and hurting Luck on the ground. His hands were swift and giant, and with too many injuries to flap his wings, it was seemingly all over. Yet, Luck could not stand for defeat, not in the face of his lord. He looked up at the incoming hands with serious eyes, determined to fulfill his duty. It was finally his turn. He must protect his lord, just like his lord protected him. He instinctively held his hands up, feeling a massive rush of unknown energy flowing through his fingertips as he yelled the words at the tip of his tongue. Magic arrow. A small ball of blue energy shot out of Luck's palm and through Liker's fingertips, heading straight for his face. "Huh, you missed." He flexed his head to the left, avoiding the unknown attack. That was when his vision went pitch black, like someone had turned off the lights in the room. "You were never my target." He heard a small, deadly voice coming from the dark. "My wisp. You took out my wisp." His rage once again exploded as he frantically looked around for both the vampire and the fairy. The darkness of the night consumed him. The small light he saw was only what was shining down from the full moon, which was admittedly not very much. Wherever he looked, he always found nothing. When he tried to cast another wisp, his meager mana was too depleted. He was truly losing his mind. That was when, in the darkness, he found a tiny crimson spark that was clearly outlined, yet nothing around it. It was not too far away from him, maybe 3 or 4 meters away. And not even a split second later, that small spark multiplied tenfold and shined through the darkness of the night, and allowed him to see the bloody, beating, predator-like eyes of that vampire. The injuries still clearly shone on his body. Full moon, crimson nova. He was far too late. The attack was too quick. He felt fear, for the first time in a long time. He felt fear that completely replaced the anger in his heart. The ball of crimson flames was hurling at his body so quickly that his hurting eyes and slightly injured body could not handle it. God forgive me. I'm so sorry. Martha. Ahhhhhhhh. He cursed his entire existence. The pain and despair of utter failure flooded him as he was engulfed with bloody, demonic flames from the depths of hell, his screams growing ever more distorted until they were heard no more. The flames raged on like a crimson tornado, eating up everything in its path until it gradually settled down. The once standing, frantically shaking, and screaming figure inside of it was now seemingly no more as it slowly came crashing down from its knees. Now all that was left of him was a charcoal, beyond burnt corpse, the fiery spark-like magma still more than visible on his skin, and especially on his face that bore the ugliest, most distorted visage conceivable. Ha ha, ha, ha 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 ha. You did it. My lord, you did it. Victory. Huh, that was amazing. Luck danced and scurried in the grass, jumping around like it was the best day of his life. Yet he was only able to lightly flutter his injured wings to gain a slight elevation off the ground. That was the most his body allowed. My lord, Luck took a slight moment of pause as he jumped on a rock and peered over the aftermath of the fight. The air stood unnervingly still, and the only thing other than the howling wind he could hear was the sound of heavy breathing. Huh! His mood shifted a complete and immediate 180 degrees. There he saw Alucard, or at least who he wanted to believe was Alucard. His clothes were bloody, barely able to stand as he struggled to stay on 2 feet with his bent legs. His right arm was completely limp, like it was made out of jello, dangling to the ground as it dripped blood like a faucet. His face was nearly unrecognizable, and his red eyes were wide and barbaric, pulsing with the rhythm of a beating heart. He was unable to believe his own eyes. Was that really? My lord, it's all over. You won. You won. You're injured. Calm down and let me heal you. His words were cut off short. Like a pouncing wolf, Alucard lunged at the charred body ahead of him like his life depended on it and dug his wide fangs into its neck. The smell of evaporated blood was still fresh over the corpse, yet the taste of the flesh was burnt and rocky. He growled slightly, spitting out pebbles of ash out of his mouth as he redirected his gaze towards the other bleeding corpse in the distance, the one that was completely headless. Once again, struggling to move, he forced his body to the other side of the forest, his sharp, predator-like teeth tightly clenched, his heavy breathing more than visible in the cold, nighttime air, blood gushing and exploding out of the cracks of his armor with every step until he reached his target. Huh, huh, huh. H-U-H-H-H. Like he was a rabid dog who had not seen food in weeks. He dove down towards the headless corpse and sunk his teeth into its throat, ripping out parts of his neck and chest and eating them raw. Luck was completely speechless as he watched who he did not want to believe was his lord drain all the blood out of the body like a juice box. The vigor from the corpse was sucked out dry until what was left of it was a gray, barren, bony husk of what it once was. It was like a siphon. As the corpse grew more and more scrawny, Alucard's wounds began to heal and his power and vitality were restored, all at a speed visible to the naked eye. And my lord, he muttered his first words in seemingly forever as he hopped down and intuitively slowly began inching closer and closer towards his savior. That was when a sudden chill went down his spine as he looked at the grim display ahead of him and the glowing eyes that pierced his heart. It was like he was walking straight towards hell itself. His heart lurched deep down in his chest, and his face became as damp as a river. It was an odd sensation. He wanted to inch closer, like an instinct in his body was motivating him to go out and help his lord, but at the same time, the feeling of utter fear was lingering ever so close as well, telling him to run away as far as he could before it was too late. Ah! He inwardly screamed in his hurting head, his hands over his heavily beating heart. That was when he finally came to a decision. He took his hands off his chest and clenched his fists tightly, He studied his shaky gaze and strode forward towards the amalgamation of demonic wildness ahead of him. Mountains were on his shoulders. With every step, he felt like he was going to tumble and die from the aura and savage, killing intent exuding from him. Yet, he did not stop or waver. The only thing motivating him was to help his lord, to snap him out of his madness like he would have done for him. By the time Luck reached Alucard, he had already moved on to the severed head and had nearly degraded it back to a skull. "Please, my lord, snap out of it. Calm down. It's already over. Please." Luck tugged him on the hand with all that he had, his screams not very loud, yet exceptional considering his tiny stature. More blood. He heard faint, breath-like whispers from above him as Alucard removed his mouth from the head underneath. That was when his gaze was redirected at Luck, who was grabbing onto him from below, and for the first time, they made eye contact, Alucard's snake-like tongue licking all the residual blood on his face as he prepared for his next meal. "Oh, my lord. And no, is that really why you?" Just like before, he lunged down towards the only blood-filled creature around him with his mouth first, and Luck reacted instinctively by raising his arms up out of fear and looking away. Ah! Monstrously large fangs dug into Luck's whole right arm as it could barely hang on to his main corpse other than by a small thread of connecting flesh. Asterisk growling. Asterisk. For the first time since coming to this new reality, Luck cried, his childlike tears flowing from his purple, slightly open eyes like a waterfall, snot filling his bloody, rosy, distressed face. "Am I, Lord?" Suddenly, there was a flash and an image that appeared in the monster's red, blood-filled vision. A flash of a red-eyed, little black-haired boy. The terrified, injured, and bloody face of a child. One cowering in the corner from shadowy, merciless, demonic giant towering over him. And just like that, color came back into his eyes, and his mind was unshackled and free. His vision was once again clear, and more than clear was what he was doing in front of him. His red eyes immediately started losing their demonic brightness and began to quiver at what was in front of him. He felt a terrible wave of pain ravage his non-existent heart and undead soul as he immediately opened his mouth and released Luck's arm that was barely attached free. Another pulse of mental agony overcame his body. He clenched his unbeating heart out of human instinct and crawled back until he tripped, making him lie down on his back staring at the moon with trembling, crying eyes, his arms over his crimson hands holding his blood-stained head. What have I done? What have I become? I've become what I hated and sicken me most. I've become one of those demons in my life. Hey, monster! Slowly, Alucard forced his eyelids apart, vision swimming in a haze. The world spun like a broken compass. Instinct urged him to rub the blur from his eyes, but his body refused to cooperate. It felt like his limbs belonged to someone else. Every twitch required effort. Every movement, a small victory. When he finally blinked his sight clear, a rough, rocky ceiling greeted him, familiar in a way that made his thoughts stumble. The soft pop of flames crackled nearby, their glow flickering warmly against the stone. He lay still, oddly calm, letting the ambient noise ground him. Where am I? What was I doing? His mind groped through the fog for answers, and then something small, bright, and blubbering slammed into his face. My lord, you're awake. I was so scared. A teary, purple-haired fairy, Luck, clung to his cheek, sobbing into his skin with glittery wetness. You wouldn't wake up, and I couldn't feel a pulse, and I thought, well, you're already technically dead, but not like dead. And the words poured out like an overflowing bucket. Alucard tried to follow, but his brain had already tuned out the noise. Luck was repeating himself, unraveling the same thread again and again. Still, the sentiment, it touched him more than he expected. No one had ever worried for him like this. Not since his father. A bittersweet smile crept across his face. It was my fault, Luck wailed. I chipped my wing and couldn't run, and the bear caught up and... Shoo! Alucard lifted a heavy finger and pressed it gently across the fairy's mouth. Don't beat yourself up. You did great, Luck. You dragged me to safety, cleaned me up. Without you, I'd probably be ash by now. He smiled faintly. Besides, that bear would have shown up eventually. All I did was return the favor. We're even now. Luck sniffled, then brightened like someone had flipped a switch inside him. His tiny form shimmered. Okay, if you say so, then we're even. I'm really glad you're okay. Me too. Alucard gave him a nod, then glanced around. The cave was small, cramped really. A makeshift fire danced at its center. Sunlight filtered through a narrow exit, casting long streaks of warmth across the cold stone. Not the same cave he'd made home, but the one he'd once hidden in. He guessed luck had dragged him here rather than hauling his weight all the way back. Looking down, he noticed his armor was cleaned, though still scuffed and cracked. Another point for luck. "Where's the bear?" he asked. "Right outside. Same spot you left it." "And how long was I out?" "Just a few hours. The sun only rose recently." "Got it." With effort, Alucard rolled to his side and pushed himself upright, bones creaking like rusted metal. He stretched as best he could before limping toward the mouth of the cave, toward the sun. Vampire. Sunlight. Mortal enemy. Any other man would have balked. But Alucard, he was curious. The game mechanics had followed him into this world so far. Would this be any different? He extended a finger into the beam of light. No smoke, no sizzle, no dramatic explosion of dust. Encouraged, he slowly slid his arm forward. That's when it hit him. The weight. Like someone had tied bricks to his bones. His arm felt impossibly heavy, dragging his balance sideways until... thud! He collapsed out of the cave's shade, directly into the sun. Pant. What the hell? This is way worse than the game. The sunlight didn't just weaken him. It crushed him, flattened him. His energy drained like water down a sink. He could barely think, let alone move. "My lord, are you okay?" Luck zipped to his side, perfectly fine under the sun, which only made Alucard feel worse. In Rebirth, daytime was a manageable inconvenience. Here, it was practically a death sentence. He couldn't imagine fighting like this. Even a low-level thief could kill him before lunch. This was the first time he truly felt the curse of being a vampire. The blue sky, the warm sun, the serene morning, all beautiful, all hostile. Desperate to alleviate the strain, Alucard opened his stat screen. 10 unassigned points. He hovered over resistance. It would help. It always helped in the game. But no, he wasn't going to butcher his build for the sake of convenience. He dumped the points into physical attack and agility. Not optimal, but consistent. Yet the sun still pinned him like a bug under glass. Tisich, he clenched his teeth. Only one option left. He stripped completely naked. Luck had seen worse. Modesty wasn't a luxury he could afford right now. Surprisingly, it helped. Slightly. With effort, he stood. He scanned the sun-bleached terrain. The bear's corpse lay nearby, nestled in a patch of shade beneath a tree. "Luck, scout ahead. I don't want to die now that I've lived." "On it, sir." The fairy zipped off like a shooting star. Bit by bit, Alucard limped toward the tree. The shade was a godsend, just enough relief to move. A mechanic the game had promised to add, but never did. Reaching the corpse, he wasted no time. He bit into its neck and drank. The blood was warm, metallic, and bitter. Not nearly as satisfying as he'd hoped. Maybe it was because it had cooled. Or maybe blood degraded with time in this world. Another test for another day. He wiped his mouth and retrieved his blade from the bear's skull. Then, awkwardly, began carving it apart. He wasn't a butcher, and it showed. But he managed to hack out several chunks of meat, which he tossed toward the cave. Food, resources, maybe even currency, if the pelt held any value. Once he was done, he prepared for another trial by fire. "I can do this," he told himself, steeling his resolve. He crouched, gathered all the strength he could, and leapt. Plop! He barely made it a few feet before falling flat again. The sun dragged at him like gravity had tripled. He clawed his way back to the cave, armor abandoned. To anyone else, the grassy path might have seemed idyllic. Peaceful. Birds chirped. Leaves rustled. To Alucard, It was a gauntlet of torment. When he finally crossed the threshold and collapsed into the shade, it felt like he'd survived a war. He lay on his back, breath shallow. His mind drifted. He was weak, inexperienced. He didn't know how this world worked, not truly. The people, the politics, the powers. He needed to get stronger. He needed to learn. Returning to his original cave was the next step. Grind levels, unlock classes, learn spells, gather intel. But that could wait. Right now, he needed only one thing. A nap sounds really nice right about now. And with that, the would-be vampire lord, half-naked and completely drained, drifted into the comfort of darkness once more. Ren stared closely at him, too focused and shaken to even move, let alone speak. Here, don't you worry about anything. I understand you need blood. Please have this. Lux softly smiled, a shaky smile, hovering his ripped arm over his lord's mouth as his blood slowly trickled over his fangs and down his throat, Ren's eye growing even wider and his mind going into more turmoil than he could ever remember in a very long time. What's happening? How is this real? I thought he would surely run away in fear or hate me after what I did. Why? Why is he doing this? What's going on? Is this because he's a programmed NPC? Ren honestly did not know how to feel, but his dominant emotion was oddly happiness. And my lord, do you need more? Lux spoke once again, snapping some sense back into Ren's mind. Oh, I'm fine. Thanks for that. You didn't need to go through all that. Ren immediately waved Luck off, telling him to stop before he slowly sat up, Luck now firmly on his lap. Oh, my lord, I'm so happy you're okay. Luck smiled brightly, sparks and shimmers of light floating all around him, which further increased Ren's disbelief. Hey, Luck, can't you just heal yourself or something? Ren asked seemingly somewhat casually. Oh yes, I can, but I just wanted to make sure that I was bleeding enough for you to go back to normal. He somewhat shyly responded, firing fairy dust up in the sky for half a minute until he was fully healed. Ren blinked a few times before taking a deep breath. His soul began to settle down, and his mind was slowly coming back to normal. It seemed like Luck's NPC tendencies for loyalty saved him. There was no other explanation for why a man like him could even exist. I guess I just worried over nothing. What the hell was I even thinking? Was I reverting back to that same snowflake I was before? I wouldn't survive a day thinking like that. He softly laughed at himself. I can't believe I almost thought my mother and that bitch were the good guys. How down bad was I? He felt his non-existent stomach turning and a sudden, strong urge to puke. That was when he came to an abrupt realization. Why? Why was I like that? Did I really see Luck as a friend? Alucard slowly stood up, and Luck reflexively began flying behind him. He stretched his body slightly and gazed upon the entire battlefield and the two corpses, one of which he had eaten beyond recognition when he was frenzied. It seems like there's a lot for us to clean up, right, Luck? Why, yes, of course. But first, let's get all our things from the other cave. There might be other people sent here to investigate these people's deaths after a while. Plus, we've gotten strong enough hunting here. It's about time we moved out of this place and expand our narrow view of the world. Follow me. Alucard casually walked away from the battlefield and back into the dark forest, Luck following moderately close behind. That was when Alucard suddenly stopped. Odd silence grew all around them, and nothing could be heard other than the howling wind. Luck was caught off guard and instinctively stiffened up unbeknownst to Alucard. That was when the thick atmosphere was cut by Alucard's words that almost seemed out of character in Luck's eyes. Hey, Luck, I'm really sorry for what I did. I wasn't myself, and I should have been more careful. That is what happens when I lose too much blood. I had no idea it would be that bad at the time, but now I sure do. Anyways, I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate all the help, and it truly means a lot. Hope you're okay. Luck was not able to see his lord's face, but just from his tone and mannerisms, it was safe to say he wore a genuine smile of care and relief. Thank you so much, my lord. It really means so much to me to see you care. Like I said before, I don't hold anything against you. I'm certain that the circumstances forced you into that situation. I should thank you for all of your trust in me. Luck could not help but feel slightly warm inside as he smiled to himself, like there was a campfire of light healing his aching heart. But that did not last for long. Suddenly, an unforeseen wave of odd pain ravaged his entire system, and he began to see things that were not there. His eyes grew wide and unsettled as he stared at his lord's back. He immediately clenched his left hand on his now accelerating, heavily beating heart, and his fully healed right arm that still bore dry remnants of his own blood on it was out in front of him, spread out wide, as he deeply inspected it and rubbed it around his entire body like he was making sure his flesh and limbs were intact. That was when a small grunt was heard coming out of Luck's previously heavy breathing mouth, followed up by 2 loud slaps and a heavy shake to his head, readjusting his wide, shaky eyes to something more serious and casual. "Hey, Luck, what was that sound? You good?" Oh, yes. I'm fine, my lord. Lead the way," he answered in his usual, cheerful, upbeat tone. The densely packed stone road, lit up by only torches and the light of the full moon still on top, was crawling with people visiting all of the nearby buildings and traveling salesmen set up on the outside. The diversity in the crowd was more than clear. It could be argued that it was not very diverse for a fantasy world, considering the only race seen outside of a collar were humans. There was a distinct hierarchy between the rich and the poor. The less fortunate, including even the average people, stayed clear of those who looked well endowed and kept a close eye on them just so they can ensure they don't get in their way. The fear was more than clear in their eyes. Still, a majority of the people themselves did not seem particularly rich. Most of them were wearing the regular rags expected of a medieval-age citizen. Even in the midst of the night, the road was very lively with people conversing casually amongst each other, sellers and businesses advertising their services and strumpets, enticing the male citizens rather aggressively and whisking them away into a brothel like succubi. But even still, if one were walking on this particularly dense road, they would be very hard-pressed to find the regular street urchins more miserable than the poorest of the poor. They were usually found next to the road torches that gave them the only heat outside of their filthy, thin rags as they pleaded for money. Their constitution were like sticks, and the lack of fat made their faces look like ghosts or banshees. Most people felt disgusted looking in their direction or simply ignored them like pebbles on the road, but there were some cordial souls that stopped to lend their aid. There were no residential areas to be seen, only food markets, clothing stores, blacksmiths, alchemists, restaurants, strip clubs, along with other businesses selling their services to the public. It was clearly some sort of market district of a city. In such an area was a very distinct and massive building that stood out far more than the rest. From the outside, it seemed grandiose, yet not so pleasant and clean. Bricks and marble pillars made up most of the building's outer structure, and a large sign at the top made itself be known. It was tough to see through the large, stained glass windows, but the thrilling, boisterous sound from within could be felt outside. Through the thick crowd, various armed and armored figures stood out. Some of them were simply guards on duty patrolling the city, while others were most definitely not. They did not seem as organized and unified. They seemed more like rogues and mercenaries. But what did group them together was the fact that they were all headed in the same direction, inside that same large building. The interior was just as expansive and well-constructed as the outside, yet far dirtier, rowdier, and less lavish than what was initially displayed. Past the wooden swinging doors was a new experience. The ground and walls were made out of a mixture of stone and wood, and the high ceiling was adorned with yellow-tinted glowing crystals that reflected off the marble path that led to the front desks and gave the room an abnormally warm tone. Around the marble-laid path were many wooden tables filled with men that looked like they have seen their fair share of battles. Numerous maids were out cleaning as the men talked and split their alcoholic drinks and food all over the ground with no care in the world. "Hey, slut, give me some booze. My cup ran out." "Yes, sir. Right away." "Atta girl." The man asking for alcohol laughed as he smacked the girl from behind, and despite the sudden contact, she was only slightly startled and dared not to talk back like it was something to be expected as part of her job. Currently, the front desks were abnormally empty, and the secretaries seemed to be simply lazing around looking deadpanned at all the chaos ahead of them. The guild should really reinforce the rules about the noise and eating. Everyone is here just to celebrate their victories at night. We barely get any new people to sign up, said one of them, leaning one hand on their desk. Well, at least it means we can relax at night. No one comes here this late anyways, thanks to them. You call this relaxing? I would rather be working if it meant I wouldn't have to deal with this all night. Yeah, why did they think it was a good idea to make this place for recruiting, eating, and, as an inn, a female secretary side at the all-too-common site? They said it's to form a stronger community or something. I don't know. Well, it has seemed to be working. Kinda. One of them panned to look at two men bullying one of the newcomers on a corner table. That was when the swinging doors of the establishment waved open for what seemed like the 100th time that night. The room was getting increasingly more congested and unruly to the point that they worried about the capacity. What's up with this? Why are there so many newcomers these days? I think it's because of the recent attacks around the borders. Many cities were destroyed and razed to the ground, so the people had to evacuate. Our city probably just happened to be the nearest and safest spot. Yeah, makes sense. They all sat back down on their seat and relaxed after a hard day of work. They doubted anything interesting other than the odd fight would happen, but even then it was not their place to step in. Even if something else interesting did occur, they doubted it would be worth their time. That was when one of the secretaries, still in their post, spoke in a tired voice as they stared at a single hooded man enter the building. He stood at what seemed like a respectable 6 feet tall and wore all black, light armor along with a cloak that shrouded most of his clearly thin yet lean body. Still, that was not why he caught their attention initially. No, it was the fact that he wore a full, charred mask over his face, one so thick that the color of his eyes could not even be made out. Hey, what's up with the guy in a mask? I don't see many masked people these days. The volume of the room clearly dampened a few decibels at his arrival, and conversations started about the new guy as they smiled drunkenly and sized him up. He was most definitely special. Most people would not bat an eye at any newcomer. What made this man more interesting and garnered the attention of most was his mask and the fact that he was going to sign up at night rather than in the morning like a normal person. Most newbies would be too scared or annoyed to enter at night to sign up. It was a well-known fact that the nighttime was reserved for partying and celebration, not to mention the fact that all the workers would be too tired after an entire day of work. The other secretaries stood out of their seats and lazily took a peek. Oh, that guy does seem kind of interesting. You think he's an assassin or something? I don't know. But if he is, I'm not sure why he's joining here instead of an assassin group. Hey, you think he's coming our way? Yeah, seems like it. He probably wants to sign up. Jenny, you can take him. You're the newest one here, so it will be a good experience with talking to the unorthodox. Ugh, you're just saying that because you're too lazy to do it yourself. Maybe. Fine. But you have to take over for me for the rest of my shift. I'm going home after this. Deal. Now do it. Okay, I will. Jenny might have seemed indifferent on the outside, but that could not be farther from the truth. She was worried, more than she thought she would be. She took a deep breath and calmed her nerves. She looked at her reflection on the marble floor and fixed her long, wavy, cyan hair. Then she looked down at her work attire and skirt and made sure she was presentable. It was rather hard to see her bottom half due to her bountiful chest, but she was more than used to it by now. Being as professional as possible was a big part of the job, and she did not want to lose it, especially after working so hard to just narrowly get it the other day. This was her first step to climb up the ladder of command and become the head secretary of the establishment, which would be quite the achievement, especially for someone like her. Hello, is someone here? I want to sign up. She heard an abnormally deep, masculine voice come from the front desk that almost caught her off guard. She once again took a small pause to steel her nerves, readjusting the muscles on her face before she spoke with a bright, cheery smile on her face. Coming. She strolled over to the desk where the man stood and looked him in the mask, which was oddly even worse than looking into his eyes. Welcome to the Adventurers Guild, sir. How can I help you today? Hello. I am here because I want to sign up. Oh, wonderful. Are you already familiar with all of the rules, or do you want me to state them? I've already read up on most of that. Don't worry. Oh, great. Her smile grew brighter. It seems like you've already made up your mind. If you want to proceed with the sign-up process, please place your hand on this crystal, and you will be all set. She looked down and pulled out a blue glowing crystal from a drawer and placed it on the table. Wait, what is that? And do I not need to take any exam to prove my strength or anything? How will you assign my rank? Oh, she casually chuckled. There will be no exam necessary. All adventurers will start at the lowest rank, copper, and work their way up by completing assignments and quests given by the guild. All I need from you to sign up is your hand on this crystal to confirm who you are. That'll be all. But by doing so, you agree to bind yourself to the guild's rules. Of course, you can choose to opt out later, but joining back with the guild after that will be very difficult. So what do you say? She continued smiling through all of that as she pushed the crystal closer to the man ahead. She held her hands together and patiently waited. The man was sure taking his time thinking. It was to the point that her nervousness was slowly taking over, and she began to show slight visible sweat. But that was when he finally spoke after what felt like forever in her mind. Okay, I'll do it. Sign me up. Oh, great. So, please put your hand on the crystal, and I'll see what I can do. He nodded and did as he was told, placing his hands on the crystal that suddenly began to glow upon him, touching it. And, not too long after, a projection of pure mana appeared. The projection was almost empty, which was not a very uncommon sight. All it meant was that he had no criminal charges or big achievements tied to his name. Firstly, she needed to do was write down that he was now a registered copper rank adventurer of the Adventurers Guild. Almost done. She smiled and reassured the man who still had his hands on the crystal. Now, all I need to do is check his end name and congratulate him on his registration. PFFFFF, asterisk cough, asterisk cough. Cough, cough. But this time was different from all the others as her eyes shot completely wide and she began to cough uncontrollably with a sudden pain in her chest and a twitchy smile on her face. Hey, are you all right? Why, yeah, I'm fine. Sorry. She spoke, trying to control her breath, only to cough slightly once more, her face turning red like she was holding something in with every fiber of her being and only slightly managing to suppress it and keep herself under control. But it did not take too long for her to somewhat get her breaking act together and speak once again. PBPFFFFFFFF asterisk. One man spat out his drink like a sprinkler volley before he started uncontrollably choking on some liquid stuck in his throat, tears coming out of his eyes as his choking turned into maddening laughter. Did you hear that? No fucking way. That guy's name is Balls Deep 69. Wait, really? That has to be a joke, right? No, it's real. I heard it with my own ears. Why else would the secretary be acting like that? The secretary had said his name loud enough for some of the nearby tables who had their eyes trained there to listen, and they all at once lost their minds. The word spread like wildfire, and the entire room of drunken men began to absolutely lose themselves laughing like this was the funniest thing they have ever heard in their entire life. The sudden contagious laughter of the room got to Jenny, and she could not help but burst out laughing herself. She had held it in for too long, and this was the final straw that pushed her over the edge. I am sorry, she exclaimed, putting her hands on her mouth to try and once again hold it in before ducking down under her desk out of embarrassment. Ha 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 ha. His name is Balls. Balls Deep 69. How much did his parents hate him for them to name him that? Yeah, man, I could just imagine this. He came out of her vagina, and they immediately frowned. He looked ugly as shit. They didn't want to kill him, so they named him fucking Balls and abandoned him. Mate, please stop. You're killing me. Now I'm actually imagining that in my mind. He held his hurting stomach tightly and rubbed the sudden flood of tears in his eyes. Yeah, no wonder he's wearing a mask. At first, I thought he might be some rookie assassin or wannabe renegade, but this makes a lot more sense. The masked man simply stood still, taking all the insults and laughter head-on like nothing happened. He simply stared straight ahead in silence. Only God knew what he was thinking, and it was probably nothing pleasant. Hey guys, Watch this. One man stood up tipsily out of his seat. He was a man of tall stature. His shoulders were broad, and his constitution was like that of a mountain. His blonde hair was tied into a bun at the top of his head, and he wore what looked like a standard set of brown leather armor and a bastard sword sheathed around his waist. But what stood out the most out of his attire was an iron plate worn proudly dangling around his neck. Ha ha ha! Go get him, Ron. Give him a newbie's initiation. His rosy face was smiling unnaturally wide, and the mood it exuded was that of confidence and amusement as he strolled over towards the front desk where the masked man stood, people making way when he came past him as they cheered him on all the way. Hey there, boss. You gonna just stand there like a statue? Or are you gonna talk back? Ron leaned casually on the desk as he tried to take a peek under his mask. His speech was heavily slurred and his movements felt heavy. It was more than clear that he was drunk out of his mind. The masked man did not react and simply stood silent, not moving an inch as the crowd praised on. Still nothing to say? Damn, I must have really scared you, or you must really be ugly as hell. Huh, are you listening to him? Hey lady, is my registration over? How much is it for a room upstairs? The masked man casually interrupted Ron like he was not there or even worth his time. Go, Ron. Don't let him do you like that. Teach him a lesson. Beat his ass. Expose him. The cheers from the crowd continued, and only served to even further boost his inflated ego. Ron smirked with more confidence than ever before as he brazenly walked directly into the masked man's face. Hey, listen here, balls. I don't think you know how things work around here. You will do what I want you to do. And first thing I'll have you do is take off that stupid mask and show US how ugly you really are. And with those words, Ron lunged and thrust his hands forward towards the masked man's face as the crowd exploded in the back. Huh, gosh, shut up. SMASSSHHH. What has happened? He thought to himself. It only felt like an instant ago that his hands were touching his opponent's mask. And in the next, he felt a crushing, iron grasp squeeze his face before he felt like he flew like a rag doll. The entire world in front of him was nothing but a blurry half-white, half-black mess, his body feeling like it was run over by a carriage. Nothing felt real, and reality had yet to set in. The sounds all around him were muffled, and the world was only slowly coming back into view. It almost felt like he was in a bad dream, but it did not take too long for him to realize that it was more like a nightmare. The world slowly came into view, and he found most of his vision was covered in black that he later recognized as his opponent's filthy gloves. The only light that was entering his eyes was from the tiny slits separating his fingers. But the light was not so bright. It was shrouded by a cold, unforgiving darkness. The man's mask was clear, but through that lay two dormant eyes that felt like it was peering into his very soul. There was no light in them, no color, no hint of it at all, but his entire body was screaming at him with every fiber to look away. But from the way he was being held, there seemed to be no escape. In that instant, time froze. The feeling of death and dread had never loomed any closer above his head until now. He had to do something, and his first instinct was to reach the sword sheathed around his waist, but his entire body felt far too broken from the initial impact. His desperation even further intensified. With frantic and shaky eyes, he went into a full frenzy, trying his best to hang on a dear life. He began squirming around like a worm and screaming as he began biting his opponent's gloves like a dog. That was when he heard a cold, distant voice that put an end to all of his futile efforts. I said, shut up. Sparks of orange began to flicker in the previous darkness of his fingers that put an end to the cold atmosphere of the air. Ah! He screamed like a banshee, noticing his teeth melting right before his eyes, tears welling up in his vision only to evaporate the second they left them. The increasing flickers seemed to last an eternity, slowly increasing in pain, power, and intensity as he pushed his aching body even further to escape the ticking time bomb. But no matter how much he struggled, he was not able to run away from the burning hell and smell of his own burning flesh. The pain was too intense to the point it didn't feel real. It was far too much for him to handle, and thus his vision went blank. The entire guild hall immediately filled with silence and unexplainable coldness that consumed all, nothing but the sounds of the bustling streets of the outside road, along with the whispering wind entering the room. The spectacle displayed in front of them was something none of them, except a very select, smirking few, expected. The aggressor turned into a terrifying prey that tried to get away at all costs like it witnessed a ghost. Nay, even a ghost would have not elicited such an insane reaction. It was not an uncommon sight for a newbie to be stronger than expected and put people in their place, but something about this took their breath away. Time felt like it froze still for several minutes, but then it once again started as the masked man finally began to move. All eyes on him. The masked man sighed and removed his hand from the charred face of his still breathing adversary as he slowly stood up and casually spoke, breaking the unnerving silence like nothing but a minor inconvenience occurred. "Hey, lady, are you still there? How much is it for a room?" "Oh, I am here." Jenny, the hiding secretary, spoke in a slightly shaky voice, still chuckling despite the sudden silence in the room. "It's 5 copper a night. 2 more for food and drink if you wish." She spoke rather unprofessionally, still hiding under her desk. "Very well." He nodded, and a slight movement was seen from under his cloak. "Here's 28 coins. Consider it down payment for the next 4 days." He threw down his money on the desk and waited for a response. He heard a deep breath coming from behind the desk ahead, and the secretary he once saw let herself be seen once more. She looked notably different from how she looked initially, far less organized and put together as she nervously struggled to count the coins and find the key. "Here is your key. Room 21 on the floor above. I hope you enjoy your stay." She smiled, quickly fixing her hair and steadying herself with a smile. Oh, I almost forgot. Here is your copper plate. Keep it visible on you at all times so people know you're with the guild." She placed it on the table with a jittery smile, and the man immediately took it without batting an eye. "Thank you very much." He did not waste a single second as he stepped over the charred body of his earlier adversary and marched up the stairs. The exchange did not last even 10 seconds, yet to the onlookers, it felt more like 50. And as soon as the man was out of view, it was like time resumed once again. That was so much more stressful than I initially thought. Jenny thought to herself as she clenched her heavily beating heart and wiped the thick droplets of sweat off her forehead. But as soon as she opened them once more, her gaze immediately fell upon the unconscious, steaming body on the floor, coughing and struggling to breathe. What the hell happened here? She could not help but mumble as she looked up at the drunken crowd that immediately began laughing like usual, all incited by one single man. The masked man hurriedly walked up the stairs as quickly as he could, passing by other fellow adventurers before he found his room located towards the end of the wooden hallway that had a window at its rear, peering over the illuminated and busy roads of the city. With his key in hand, he took a deep breath and opened the door, immediately locking it behind him as he entered. He was humbly greeted by a simple yet equally disgusting room. The wooden, splinter-infested floor was covered in remnants of unfamiliar food and unknown liquids, while the stained walls were the home of mold that grew especially in their corners. The room was rather small, yet could not be considered claustrophobic. It was adequate enough for a wooden desk in the corner alongside a single bed near the open window that overlooked another part of the city. It did not seem like the most comfortable place, yet it certainly beat out sleeping on the cold, hard, unforgiving cave floors. Turning around to once again reassure the door was locked behind him, the masked man casually strolled towards the open window and immediately closed the blinds before sitting on his hard bed with a thick sigh of relief. Looking all around him before he removed his mask, revealing his piercing, blood-red eyes, sharp, viper-like fangs, and his skin that was as pale as the palest snow. Of course, it was none other than Alucard. After taking care of the adventurer group in the forest, he searched and eventually came across their camp. It did not house much, but the few items it did were more than useful, though, sadly, he was not able to carry everything with him without looking extremely suspicious. The only things he decided on taking in the end were some of the money, a new set of equipment, including a white mask that he later turned black with his own flames, one more than good enough to fully mask his clear vampire features, and finally, several odd-looking potions that he had never seen in his entire life. Nevertheless, even out of those, Alucard was very selective with what he took and simply trashed the entire camp to the best of his abilities in order to make it seem like the work of a beast. And it was common sense that a beast would not steal all the valuables before going on a rampage. Not only that, but to also ensure everything lined up, he went back to the battle scene to make it as convincing as possible that it was from the work of a beast, more specifically, the Forest Guardian. Luckily for him, most of his work was already completed for him due to his previous outrage induced by his loss of blood. As such, all he had to do was remove any evidence of bloodsucking. Now, their residence in the forest was far too dangerous considering the possibility of higher-level investigation teams from the Adventurers Guild. Thus, immediately after doing that, Luck and Alucard made their journey towards by far the biggest border, the city of Oslo, the very same place where the adventurer team they killed resided and the very same that Henlo told them about. And now that they were here, it was finally time to expand their horizon, properly explore the new world, and find the best way to make money for what Alucard had planned. It all started with the Adventurers Guild. But now that he was here, things did not go exactly as planned, as Alucard was left scratching his head, taking in how badly things went down a few seconds earlier. Erg! Those people make my blood boil. How dare they make fun of such an honorable name? It's truly despicable. A purple, tiny flying figure zoomed out of his cloak and flew around the air in frustration. Don't worry about that now, Luck. I think we might have a bigger problem on our hand for us to worry about that. Alucard mellowly chuckled, shaking his head. What might that be, my lord? You did a very good job of asserting your dominance. You left them all speechless. So, what is the problem, my lord? Nothing. Nothing at all. It's probably my tiredness getting to me. Alucard let out an audible sigh. He wanted to explain how what he just explained was a bad thing, but he was too tired and mentally drained to bother explaining. He simply decided it would be best if Luck. On the outside, he seemed calm and relaxed in front of that crowd, but on the inside, he could not help but be slightly panicked as he wanted to get things over with as soon as possible. He had absolutely no intentions to elicit such a reaction from the audience. He did not intend to bring too much attention to himself. He simply defended himself after some random idiot tried to unmask him. But that led to him screaming like a lunatic, which indicted slight panic from Alucard, who thought he figured out who he was, so he resorted to burning him unconscious to shut him up. However, it had the effect of also shutting up the crowd and drawing all attention on him. Nothing made sense to him until now that he finally had time to ponder. After his 5th level into his vampire class, he unlocked a passive skill called Undead Presence, which in the game served to give a slight fear debuff to all weaker living beings once in combat. Little did he know at the time, but that same effect took hold of a great majority of the crowd along with the man he attacked. Now, in his new reality, since there was no determining factor of what and didn't count as in combat, he discovered that the skill now could be activated by sheer killing intent and can take hold of multiple people. This made him realize that he desperately needed to work on better managing his emotions. On one hand, this served to tell him that he might be stronger than a fair amount of people present at the time. But, on the other hand, it might lead to his downfall after causing such a scene upon his first arrival. Only time could tell, and Alucard's hands were left to the whims of fate. Alucard did not tire nor require any kind of sleep due to his undead nature, but he was still unable to break out of some of his human habits, so he always made sure to get some sort of sleep whenever he could. And now was a better time than any considering how drained he felt. He took one last whiff of the not-so-fresh air before once again grabbing his thick black mask. Slowly entering the first bed he felt in months as he stared up at the creaking boards of the room's ceiling. Although the mask blocked much of his airflow from the outside world, he was not about to take any chances of people somehow peeking inside his room only to find out he was a vampire. Besides, Alucard thought that the thinner air entering his nose as he slept would slowly train him to be able to utilize his undead body's strength of not needing air to its full advantage and eventually break out of his human practices. As he laid down on the bed, he could not help but find many similarities between it and the hard stone ground of the moist cave he used to reside. Even after readjusting himself multiple times, the feeling of rock hitting his head and back could not be escaped. This was all a reminder of how he was currently at the bottom of society. A rich, well-endowed man like him slept on the most comfortable of beds, yet now he could not remember that feeling, nor did he think of it too fondly. To him, it was all the same now. He had seen more than enough horrors in his single month of being here, and people who had it far worse than he did. He had no right to complain about a slightly uncomfortable bed. He looked up mellowly at the ceiling and began to slowly ponder. Just like the game, the world was lacking in technology, but made up for it with its heavy origins in magic. But that did not come as a surprise to him at all. Alucard had seen many things upon entering the city and had learned much about the reality and culture of this new world. It was rooted in strict tradition and social laws far more than the rather free, in comparison world he was used to. It was a rather jarring, eye-opening experience when he first set foot on the busy roads of the city. The social divide between the classes were more than clear at but a glance. It was like half the people he would see on the streets were nothing but rags, and a good chunk of them claimed certain corners of the roads as their homes. It was like he could not go a few steps without noticing at least one man begging for money. The rich and nobles walked around proudly like they were on top of the world, while the poor and rags seemed to try their best to survive and get by without getting in trouble, as guards could not care less about them. But not even those people had it the worst. No, it was by far the non-human slaves. Those were the true dirt of society. It was impossible to see any non-human sentient creature in anything outside a collar and thick chains. They were publicly beaten senseless if they did not do as they were told, and were treated worse than the worms that slivered on the ground on rainy days. They were common to see amongst certain rich and nobles. From the brief moment Alucard took to find the Adventurers Guild, he managed to come across all kinds of slaves. Everything from elves, lizard men, wolf men, orcs, and far more. That alone spoke volumes about the state of this country's economy and social systems. Alucard had never been an advocate or anyone's life other than his own, and there was no way he was about to begin now. Not to mention, he had no business discussing something he lacked complete knowledge of. He had no idea about anything pertaining to the history of the country or its people like any previous wars that would have made this happen. He had only gotten a surface view from the first few minutes he saw of the city. There was still much for him to learn and much for him to adapt in order to fit in and not stand out. At a first glance, this world was very similar to that of the game he knew and loved, but upon closer inspection, that could not be farther from the truth, especially in one area. When he walked around the city, it was nearly impossible to see a woman that did not wear a dress or skirt, walking around trying their best to appear as pretty and dignified as possible. This was especially obvious in the rich, but oddly existed in even the lowest class. Not only that, out of all the guards patrolling the busy roads, not one of them was a woman. At that point, he could not come to any conclusion considering he had only visited certain parts of the city. But once he entered the guild hall, it was more than clear. It was the most masculine gathering he had ever seen. The testosterone was almost oozing out of the walls. Every single adventurer, with no exception, was male, while a bulk of the staff were the only females around. They were all treated like second-class objects that the men used for their own purposes. Harassment was not too far off the table. It was truly a medieval society through and through. It was truly despicable, yet at the same time, he was no hero and felt no obligation to do anything about it. But that made him wonder even more as the sudden image of that golden-eyed woman popped up in his mind along with that piercing stare that was etched deep down in his subconscious and still sent shivers down his spine to this very day. "Hey, Lord Alucard, are you going to sleep now?" His thoughts were immediately interrupted by a sudden, glowing figure flying directly into his line of sight. "Yes, Luck, I am." He smiled underneath his mask. Can I sleep beside you?" he nervously asked, taking Alucard by surprise. "Sure, why not? It's not the most comfortable place, but here you go." He scooted over to the left side of the bed to allow Luck some space on the pillow. "Thank you so much, my lord." He fluttered down and snugly made himself comfortable on the rock-hard pillow, the light turning extremely dim around his body as he slowly closed his eyes and went to sleep like a little child. "Hey, aren't you scared I might move while I sleep and accidentally crush you?" He gently shook his head. "I trust you, my lord, just like you trust me. I'm certain nothing like that will happen." Luck smiled, closing his eyes once again, and peacefully went to sleep. Alucard's eyes suddenly softened as he looked at Luck's peacefully sleeping figure, and he could not help but be once again overwhelmed with a sudden wave of guilt. The memory sprung back into his brain like a volcano. The memory of outrage brought upon by his thirst for blood and the sight of the beyond scared face Luck wore, which was brought upon by his actions. In Rebirth, that outrage was the vampire passive, Blood Furor, which simply increased certain vampire powers but made the user aggro on every enemy in sight indiscriminately, unable to escape or flee from battle. The player had lower defense and was slightly harder to control in such a state, but was still very playable. Not to mention that the state did not force attacks on allies due to the no friendly fire set in place by the developers. To a certain point, it was almost a joke debuff that players at times even resorted to on purpose, depending on the situation. In hindsight, he should have completely expected for this mechanic to be tweaked to translate to this new world, but he was too ignorant. And as such, he had to pay the price. Yet, despite all of that, Luck still acted the same towards him and even felt comfortable sleeping next to him. If he did it out of his own free will and not out of some programmed AI embedded in him, he couldn't imagine the strength needed to do what he did. He wondered if that was how a true partner was meant to be. Alucard struggled to open his eyelids that felt like they were sealed shut by several locks. His blurry eyes that sat under his thick black mask found it harder than usual to adjust to the light, but it did not take too long for the world to finally come into view. He blinked several times before his face laid frozen. He simply gazed up with a lazy stare at the now orange-tinted wooden ceiling that was concealed by a thick layer of illuminated dust that elegantly danced in the air, and the ambient sound of birds chirping loudly trickled into his ears through the small cracks of the unpolished window. He could not help but find himself lost at the humble, rather familiar, warm feeling of the view. It was peaceful and unusually somber. It almost felt like a dream that he could stay in forever. But like all dreams, it sadly had to come to an end. Greya. He once again blinked many times as he was mellowly snapped back to reality by the sound of slight grunting coming from his side. It seemed to be always there, but he did not notice until this very moment, as though it was filtered out by his ears. When he tried to turn his head to the side, he found it to be just as difficult, if not more difficult, than forcing his eyes to open. Still, he persevered through the unusual pain, and he was rewarded by quite an odd sight. There he saw Luck, fast asleep, yet not so peaceful. He shook around, switching from side to side like he was in a cradle. His face that held an ocean of sweat was contracted in agony, his teeth biting his lower lip tightly to the point that blood began to drip and mix with the sweat. The sweat spread all around his body and leaked onto the pillow underneath, forming a wet puddle where he laid. Alucard's dull eyes shot wide open as he witnessed what was going on and heard the low grunting. It was the first time he saw anything like this happen. He had many things going through his mind, but as though it was out of instinct, he forced his heavy hand up and slowly brought it towards him. "Hey, Luck, what's up? You okay?" He nudged him lightly with one finger, and Luck's eyes immediately sprung to life. "Why?" he screamed before his reality set back in, looking at the ceiling of the room. He lifted his hands up in the air and inspected the state of his body with clear shock. "Luck, you hear me?" He heard a sparse voice to his side, and he abruptly shuddered before he took several deep breaths, shaking his head and slowly turning around to meet that voice head-on. He was met by a black mask, but underneath that mask he sensed eyes of concern staring at him, which helped ease his nerves and calmed him down, giving him the courage to smile. "Oh, Lord Alucard, I'm so sorry to startle you. It's nothing to worry about. It's just that some days during the year, we fairies experience unbelievable pain when we sleep. This is the trade-off we have for receiving our fairy dust." He lifted himself and wiped the sweat off his forehead. "See, I'm good as new." He smiled, fluttering all around Alucard's head in elegant laps before he rested softly on his shoulders. Alucard could not help but feel slightly skeptical about this fact he had never heard about, but he eventually disregarded it as something he had not read up on or simply something new to this reality of his. He was just glad Luck was okay and that it was not his fault in some way. Huh? What am I even thinking? He shook his head, seemingly out of nowhere, but when he did, it almost felt like it was about to explode like the watermelon it felt like. "Glad you're okay," he replied back as he tried to force himself to stand outside of bed, his hands tightly gripping his dizzy head. "My lord, are you okay?" His hands still on his head, he managed to get out of bed and bring himself up on 2 feet, nodding towards Luck, who flew off his shoulders. He did not want to directly answer him, just in case there was anyone spying at them through the door. He was almost certain that it was not well made or insulated, and he did not want to take any chances. So, in the end, he simply whispered it all to Luck. "It's because of the sun. These curtains are like paper. They don't even work." Alucard should have both expected the low-quality blinds to leak in sunlight, and for that to be the reason for his weak body. But he only now noticed, due to him being lost in some weird nostalgic fantasy he barely even remembered. He felt stupid. Now was not the time nor place to waste time for such things, not when there was much to be done. Alucard's headache was intense, but it did slowly get better. Taking that in along with the color of the light shining in, the sun must have been close to completely setting. How dare they put you in such a filthy room? Have they no respect? Luck screamed in a whispering voice. "Don't worry, we won't be forced to live in this dump forever. I have bigger and greater things planned." Alucard sighed and chuckled at Luck's words. "Oh yes, certainly, I have no doubts." He nodded vigorously as he saw his lord slowly inch towards the door. "Come on, Luck. There's much to be done today if we want to survive in this new, unforgiving world. Let's go on our first field trip in the city." "Of course." He beamed and swooped down towards his lord's shoulders. In the pocket Luck, Alucard shook Luck off his shoulders and pointed at a pocket along his cloak. "I don't know how this city will react to your kind, and I'm not taking any chances. You can take small peeks out for air, but that's it. You're not to come out unless I allow it. Don't worry, I'll let you out once I go on my first mission." Luck seemed somewhat disappointed, but completely understanding. But when Alucard made that promise, his eyes immediately twinkled with glee. "Is that a promise?" "Yes, it's a promise." "Okay." Despite how much he clearly hated it, Luck smiled brightly and did as he was told. "Hey, Jenny, we're about to go on our break. Can you take over for us?" "Yeah, sure, why not?" "Thanks, Jen, you're the best." She deeply sighed as the sounds of her fellow staff members' laughter echoed into her ears. She tried to act indifferent on the outside, but she could not shake away the unease in her heart, especially after yesterday's events that continuously popped up in her mind. She scratched her head vigorously before she took several breaths to calm herself down and forget about her worries. Yesterday was bad enough, and she had no plans today to make it any worse. She forced her tired, baggy eyes open, leaning her head on her hands as she stared calmly at the rather soothing Guildhall ahead, like she was a zombie. "Hey, Missy, can you tell me where can I find the salt?" "Yes, of course. Right over there." She smiled and pointed to the side counter. "Thanks. You're very welcome." Jenny smiled brilliantly at the disgusting face of the blushing man, feeling inner revulsion that she was not allowed to show before going back to her normal face. That was when she sighed once again, looking at the increasingly dimming light shining through the thick glass windows over the swinging front doors. The hall was rather empty. She could count all the people on the inside on one hand. This was known by the staff as the dead zone, a time in the day when people were not recruiting and eating to prepare for their next adventure, and a time when they were not back to sleep and celebrate. It was sometime in between then. Currently, It was nearly sunset, and most of the adventurers were out either on an assignment, exploring, or doing some errands. There was no reason for them to stay. The few stragglers that remained were either people who came in to eat or simply the deadbeats that everyone hated or could simply find no team. Though it was the most peaceful time of day, it was also by far the most boring. There was nothing to be done that would help distinguish herself from her peers and further make up for yesterday's disaster. The hall was clean, the quests and assignments were all posted, and no mail carriers were going to come to deliver anything new anytime soon. She had already done it all and extra. All that there was to do was wait, and wait, and wait, and wait, and wait. Eventually, the waiting felt too long, and she was left staring at the unmoving front doors with ever so dimming eyelids until her blurry vision suddenly went blank. Miss, 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 are you there? Miss, she heard faint, rather familiar whispers enter her ears, but she felt too fatigued to even think before responding. Yes, I'll be right there. Stop nagging me. I do more than enough around here, okay? Excuse me. She heard the voice once again, only this time was even louder. She yawned loudly, scratching her eyes wide open, the light of the hazy world hitting her eyelids. Only this time, that light was not bright at all, like there was a shadow looming over her. Not to mention, her vision was abnormally filled with black, which made her deeply wonder. Hello, are you all right? It only took for that same sound to enter her ear one last time before something clicked in her brain, and she was finally shocked back to her senses, her eyes slowly panning up only to be met by that same black mask as the day before. Her eyes spurred open, and her trembling pupils dilated into the size of peas as she peered into the dead, lifeless void of the man's eye sockets that seemed to be mere moments away from consuming her whole. I'm so sorry for this, Mr. Balls. I beg for your forgiveness. She promptly shot up stiffly before punctually lowering her head. Her heart rate skyrocketed, and her face began sweating buckets, some drops even falling onto the floor below. Jenny had not slept the night before. Instead, she had stayed up the entire time, completing miscellaneous tasks and extra work in order to help make up for her blunder of embarrassing and disrespecting a future adventurer by laughing at his name, especially one as capable-looking as him. In her eyes, it was a massive stain on her reputation, and she needed some way to wash it off. She did not know what got into her the day prior and what exactly provoked her to act so childish and unprofessional. This was not the first sleepless night of work she endured, though this was the only time she felt so fatigued to the point of falling asleep. She could not believe her luck. This was the first time doing such a thing, and it had to be just as that man came. More than once, she was warned about the dangers and reality of her job, but she pushed onwards. Only now that she was face to face with that hardship did she truly understand, and it did not even take a month of working to reach such a point. She was certain that the man in front of her could ruin her life if he so pleased. The vision of her entire world crumbling after she had struggled so tirelessly to get to where she stood now was vivid in her mind. Almost more than any other time in her life, she wanted to curl up into a little ball and cry, that or to be buried and forgotten about rather than be remembered as a failure. Don't concern yourself with such minor things. It's no inconvenience. After what felt like an eternity, the man finally spoke his first words that sounded cold and harsh in tone, but rather different in meaning. On the outside, Jenny did not react, but on the inside, her mind raced at his response that she did not at all foresee. Thank you so much for your kindness. It truly means a lot. I cannot begin to apologize enough about yesterday. Her voice was unsteady, and she waited patiently for a response which felt like it took forever as more sweat flowed from her forehead and onto the ground. Fear not, I don't hold against you. You are simply doing your job. Now, CA. Thank you so much, Mr. Balls. I promise IT won't happen again. Her heart began racing even wilder, and her bow was now a near 90-degree angle as a massive sense of relief overcame her body. Hey, lady, can you calm down? Everyone is looking at us. OOP, she shut her mouth and took several deep breaths. Are you okay? Oh, yes. I'm okay, Mr. Balls. Thank you for worrying about me. Please don't call me Balls. I'm so sorry. Mr. Balls Deep 69. Not that either. She heard the frustration in his voice that suddenly shifted, and she immediately quivered. That name was all an accident that I shall not explain to the likes of you. All you need to know is that my true name is Alucard. That is the name I want to be referred to by. Alucard? That is quite the odd name, but one that sounds very exotic. She nodded slightly, only to hear an annoyed voice coming from above. My face is up here. Why stare at the ground? I apologize. She shot up stiffly once again and trained her gaze towards him. I simply wanted to show my sincerest apologies for my previous actions. I see. You should just calm down. I won't eat you. Too much stress is very bad, you know. He sighed and slightly nodded his head, and before she even had the chance to respond or apologize with anything past an initial reaction, Alucard spoke once more. Anyways, I came here to ask if I could have or purchase an in-depth copy of the city map. Oh, yes. She scrambled around her desk and pulled out a piece of paper tied with a red bow. One free map will be provided to each adventurer by the guild. I got the impression from your name, but are you not from around here? No, I am from a land far, far away. You need not concern yourself with the private matters of your client lady. His eyes seemed to pierce into her heart as he grabbed the paper from the desk and took one last look at the trembling woman before he began walking away. That was when he heard a voice come from behind him, and he immediately turned around. Are you not hungry? Do you not need the free meal you paid for from the guild? Not today. I have a restaurant I want to eat at in mind. Nevertheless, thank you for the reminder, lady. He waved her off, the few men still in the hall, eating their meal, staring at him as he walked towards the door. But out of everyone in the room, Jenny's stare was by far the most intense. She immediately clasped her heart, feeling it to be like a battering ram trying to break out of her chest. Things had not gone nearly as she had initially envisioned it in her head when she had woken up to see him staring down at her. Her hurting mind spun in circles as she tried her best to take in everything that had just occurred. She had so many questions that she was unable to ask. That was by far the oddest interaction she had with an adventurer, and she was conflicted on how she should feel. But despite all of that, the last thought she had as she stared at his back, leaving through the dim light of the swinging door, was how she felt like he was moving rather rigid and strange, like he was carrying something heavy before the other thoughts consumed her. Just who is that man? Alucard exited the guild hall with a headache brewing up in his undead skull. In spite of the fact that the sun was setting and its light was nowhere near as strong as in the middle of the day, its powers were still felt weighing him down with every step, although it was admittedly not as bad, especially if he followed the path with the most shadows. He could still walk, although it was far less than comfortable and demanded considerable effort. However, the sun was not the only reason for the strain that festered his mind. What's wrong with that girl? Why was she so stiff and apologetic about every little thing? He thought to himself, shaking his head with his hands grasping his mask. This was a reminder of how much he despised human interactions. The only times he talked to other people was through his spaz chat and when someone would call him. It was not that he was too shy or introverted. No, not at all. It was rather a culmination of many things that made him who he was today. After he had quit his last job, he had not had proper human contact in many years. In fact, he went out of his way to avoid it. He rarely ever went outside, not even for food and shopping, which he did online. Only when absolutely necessary did he exit the safety of his home. As such, he doubted his social skills. He needed to try his best to fit into society and not stand out like a sore thumb. Being socially competent was mandatory for his survival. He could not simply avoid everyone around him as he did before. He only hoped that the reception girl did not pick up anything suspicious from him or, God forbid, surmise his true identity. In that effort, he tried his best to act as sexist as the other men around him towards her. He had not been around to analyze the crowd of adventurers and their habits other than a few initial glimpses, so he prayed that he did not come off as something out of the ordinary. He could not escape the fact that he was not only a foreigner in an unknown land, but an alien from an entirely new reality. But he could alleviate that shackle with effort, which was what he had planned today. The upbeat, music-filled central plaza of the city was where the Guildhall resided, was by far the busiest area in town. Despite the fact that the sun was setting, the bustling, congested nature of the area was not diminished, which served as great camouflage within the crowds. It was natural considering it housed everything from food and clothing to weapons and arms. Amidst the masses, the shop and stall owners let themselves be known as they energetically shouted their sales pitches over each other, grabbing the attention of the people walking by, while the older women haggled with the merchants as they looked for the freshest of food. The alluring aroma enveloping the plaza was succulent and by design, drawing men from all corners to drink and consume the warm, succulent skewers of meat on display, whilst various armored warriors were inspecting arms from the side stores, looking at items they in all likelihood could never afford. "Please, could you spare 1 copper? 1 copper. Get out of my way. Know your place. Hey, beast. 1 apple dropped is 1 lash. Understood." From an outside look, all was positive, yet there was much brewing underneath if one kept a closer eye. It was all a familiar sight to when Alucard had first entered this city, the city of Anri, which was the major city of the kingdom closest to the border of the Orobonian theocracy. As Alucard walked, he noticed several stairs headed his way. It was to be expected considering his rather flashy, masked attire, that and the probable rumors surrounding him from last night. However, he paid them no heed and moved onwards, not wasting any time. However, that was when suddenly one thing significant enough for him to stop everything he was doing to go and see it occurred, that along with a rather delicious smell to accompany it. Since first entering the city, he had never seen so many people gather in one area. It piqued his curiosity. Thus, he went to inspect it. My brother! My brother! All of you stay away! All of you stay away! Who did this? When Alucard drew near, he saw exactly what had happened. In front of his eyes was a short, brown-haired girl that looked no older than 14 years old, on her knees, crying over a corpse. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her body was trembling along with her speech as she looked over at the crowd surrounding her. The man underneath her, presumably her brother, had similar features to that of his sister, and seemed to be an adult. The cause of death was evident and clearly fresh, an iron dagger meticulously stabbed into his back, precisely his heart, the source of blood. Blood that trickled slowly on the ground and enveloped his previously snow-white robe, dyeing his sister's dress a similar color. Blood. Sweet, succulent human blood. Alucard shook his head and averted his eyes, cursing at his own weakness. Now was not the time for such things. The fact that this city and land was dangerous came as absolutely no surprise to him. In fact, it should have been expected. It was a simple assassination. It was no business for him to intrude. It was not like he could do anything to help even if he wanted. He took a deep breath and readjusted his mask before he turned away from the crowd, heading back to his original path. How did this happen? We were just walking. He's dead. Dead. The girl's screams of anguish echoed in his head, making his eyes soften underneath his mask before he looked up and moved onwards, picking up lingering conversations from the crowds until he was too far and their voices were lost in the wider sea of noises from the plaza. Hey, isn't that Saint Roderick? Yeah, he was a kind-hearted man. He was almost on the level of a noble. What happened? Who would have wanted to do this? I'm not sure, but I have my guesses. I've seen this happen before. After all, he was the same saint who entered this city not too long ago and began giving much charity. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. The road was tiring, and the path was arduous, but Alucard persisted through the light of the setting sun until he reached his destination, a place where he would learn the history of this fantasy world and uncover many mysteries unknown to him now. A place of knowledge that would aid him in his path to coexist and learn many things that the residents would think to be common knowledge. The library. The library of Anri was famed all throughout the lands. Scholars from various neighboring cities would traverse many miles almost as pilgrimage just to acquire access to this great house of knowledge. And the exterior of the building well represented its fame as Alucard stood at the foot of its long, marble-laid steps looking up at its massive, almost dwarfing frame. The library itself was made out of premium materials, more exorbitant than any library he could have ever imagined, with numerous statues of people of unknown origin lining up the steps pointing up. The black, limestone-like pillars that held up the archway leading towards the magnificent, large, open doors bore an intricate design he had seen so many times before, the one of the nine-tailed cat. To Alucard, it felt like a place too grand for him to belong. Even the others going up the steps around him could not help but peer over with a hint of disdain. However, luckily for him, he had done his research and could not help but smirk from under the shadow of his mask. As he entered through the doors, it was almost as if he had entered an entirely new reality. The building appeared extensive from the outside, but it was somehow even more spacious once he entered. The circle-like dome surrounding him was high, the ceiling considerably distant from where he stood. Wherever he glanced, there would always be a book. It was almost as though walls did not exist in this new world, only bookshelves for as far as the eye could see. There were many scholarly people trotting the patterned marble, pale brown tiles of the establishment, making distinct sounds that echoed and bounced throughout the room, yet were something somewhat soothing and not at all distracting. Still, the library was more than big enough to house all of its visitors. In fact, he would be hard-pressed to spot more than a few people at a time unless he went out of his way to do so. Such was its size. Though unlike what he would have expected from a normal library, this one was oddly much louder. People had no filter controlling the volume in which they spoke, making it a rather boisterous environment, especially at the door. If he were to speak now, he was more than certain that his normal voice would be drowned out. Yet, that sound was no hindrance to the grandeur of what he witnessed, as he could not help but take a moment to gawk in awe. But more than anyone, he knew that it was no place to waste time on something so trivial. As he took a deep breath further, inspecting his surroundings, as a new visitor, there was only one way to go unless he wanted a quick warrant of arrest for trespassing, and that was towards the front desk that was unusually empty. There he saw a man that he certainly did not expect in such a dignified establishment. He even blinked several times to ensure that it was not some trick of the light, and what he saw was indeed reality. It was a man dressed in a long, navy robe etched with lines of gold. His black boots were crossed on his wooden table, a red book covering his face, one that he seemed to be deeply entranced with reading. There were many other, more presentable representatives at the front desk, but for some reason, out of all of them, none drew him in more than that man that stood out like a sore thumb. "Good day, sir. I'm new here. Would it be possible to obtain a library card for entry?" He received a rather annoyed response from behind that book, one powerful and far deeper than he expected. "Couldn't you read that sign? It clearly says do not disturb. Now, leave me be. My apologies, sir, but to tell you the truth, I am incapable of reading." The man spoke once more, this time lowering his book to see the face of whom he was addressing. Just like his voice, the man's face caught Alucard by complete surprise. He had imagined him to be a cranky old man, but instead, he did not look a day older than 30. He was a handsome man with a box-like face. His black, wavy hair was of moderate length, falling down just under his eyebrows in an even part. His eyes that were not too far underneath were a similar color of black and were keenly staring at his visage. "You're not from around here, are you?" "Masked stranger." He sighed, putting his legs down and finally sitting properly. "No, I'm not. I'm a new resident of the city and a new adventurer as well." "An adventurer, you say?" His expression suddenly shifted to one of intrigue as he took particular notice to the copper plate hung around his neck. "What business would someone like you have here?" "Well, I've heard of this deal that the library made with the Adventurers Guild allowing adventurers free access to the first floor of the library. Is that not true?" "Damn right it is. You adventurers are a pretty stupid bunch. Whenever you would go anywhere, you would always bring embarrassment to the guild due to your stupidity and lack of knowledge. So, we cut a deal with the Adventurers Guild. They'd pay us money for us to take in their adventurers for free, only for the first floor. On paper, all was well. We would receive more funding. You would be less brain dead. More people would want to become adventurers to take advantage of the free access, and we'd have some potential returning customers if they wanted to access more than the first floor. What's up with this guy? Alucard could not help but think. So, let me guess, that didn't work out as expected? Yep. The mage adventurers who had always wanted to study here took the opportunity, but every other brute could not care less. It should have been something fully expected. He laughed at himself, setting his book down, to cover something that Alucard could not read. Why are you telling me all of this? What's the point? Alucard wondered. Because you're the only illiterate brute who's actually come here since the first inception of this deal. They all thought of it as a waste of time when they could be training or monster hunting. He laughed heartily at himself once more, pulling a pipe out of thin air before quickly lighting it in a slick yet flashy manner. Everyone else at least had a semblance of how to read, learn, and extract knowledge. Reading properly and having a basic level of the sciences and world nature is an opportunity reserved for very few. It is a privilege to be taught how to do so properly, but most people don't seem to see the true value in that. There's a reason why every noble child is taught how to read and write from a young age. You know, kid, I lost good money because of you. I really didn't think one of you would come. His mood became slightly somber, yet the smile on his face did not dissipate. I see. I actually really agree with you. Being eloquent in the language, reading, writing, knowing maths, history, the nature of the world. All of these are invaluable tools. Without them, you would be a stranger in your own world. You never know when you might need them. Besides, it would help make you seem dignified in front of royals and nobility, even as a commoner. You know, for an uneducated bum, you're pretty smart and well-spoken. What's your name? The unknown man behind the counter smirked and released a puff of smoke from the pipe in his hand. Alucard. My name is Alucard. He immediately responded. Alucard, eh? Not a common name, is it? But you know what? I like it, if you don't mind. What's yours? I'm known by many names around here, but you call me Raven. Raven? Not a bad name either. Now, how will I be able to get a library card? That's the easy part. The guild already did all the background checks on you. All that's needed is to register your copper plate attached to your guild identification with what we got around here. So how can I get started? Don't worry. I already got you registered. You can come in and out whenever you want, as long as you have the guild plate on you, of course. Think of that as your library card, I guess. The magic sensors should now detect that you are a Tier 1 patron. As long as you don't go up to the second floor, there should be no problems. Oh, I didn't realize. Thank you very much, Raven. Alucard smiled and nodded his head slightly before he looked over towards the true entrance of the library. However, when he took his first step, he heard that same deep voice he caught from before, yet the tone sounded profound. Wait, apologies, did I miss something? Alucard nervously turned around, looking over towards that same man who once again put his legs up on his desk and began reading with a cold, dominant air. You lied to me about your name, didn't you? Fuck me sideways. As soon as those dark, distant words were uttered, it was as if something consumed him and his world turned bleak. There was a certain feeling in the air that was unexplainable, like the end was near. If he had a heart, it would have been beating to the moon, and had he had proper sweat glands, he would have been sweating buckets. All he could do now was wait for his fate to be decided or think of a way of escape despite it all. You don't need to answer because I know you did. You know, I actually suffer from the same problem as you. Abruptly, all the tension surrounding Alucard had instantly snuffed away as though blowing out a candle, and all that was left of him was shock. Yeah, I don't blame you for that, but I'm not sure others would be so lenient. But, as a tip, it's good practice to always tell the truth when it comes to that. You have to just put up with it. Don't worry, I know how it feels. He nodded to himself before his voice became awfully quiet, turning into a whisper. My dad thought it was funny if he named me something stupid, and I was stuck with that name for the longest time. Neither I nor you need to know what that name is. I haven't told many people about this. You will take this information with you to the grave. Understood, understood, Alucard responded, his surprise only increasing as Raven spoke. Good, but you know it's not the end of the world, right? You could always save up for a name change crystal like I did. But those things are stupidly expensive and hard to find. he whispered back. Wait, those exist, Alucard shouted in a whispering voice. His eyes shot out wide beneath his mask. He had long given up on the hope of ever changing his name. After all, that was impossible in Rebirth. However, this rekindled that fire once extinguished in his heart and confirmed one more thing that he had hoped to be answered with his visit to the library. In this new world, things were not the exact same as the video game world he once knew. They're real all right. He nodded, smirking from behind his book. They're not that well known about or sought after, just really rare. They're mostly used by spoiled nobles who denounce their family and want to mess around, and by the royalty to bestow permanent titles onto people's names. It's usually pretty disrespectful to your parents if you want to change the name bestowed upon you. But in our case, I'm sure it's more than justified. I see. Thanks for the info. Thanks for everything, actually, Alucard whispered, now finally turning around to enter the House of Knowledge. Wow. Slow down there. What exactly are you going to do now? However, just like before, he was once again called, this time not in a whisper, which made him turn his back once again. I'm going to read and educate myself, Alucard responded. And how exactly are you going to do that without being able to read? He put down his book once again and looked him dead through the dark sockets of his mask. I'm not sure. I thought I'd just explore and try to teach myself, he answered honestly. That's quite bold for someone who's never learned something like this before. Well, it's the only choice I really got. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm confident in my abilities. Although it was not possible to see through Alucard's mask, his confidence was more than evident. I like your tenacity, I really do, but you have to be realistic. How would you like it if someone were to teach you how to read and write? We usually give discounts for tutoring adventures, but for you, my friend, I'd make that free. Really? You're willing to tutor me? There was a slight twinkle in Alucard's eyes. If he was tutored, it would greatly speed up the learning process. Ha. Me? Teach you? Don't be ridiculous. Of course not. He laughed hysterically, almost as though it was the funniest thing he had heard in years, tightly clenching his stomach and attracting the attention of many people in the area before he slowly calmed himself down. Havel, come here, Raven called out, and not too long after did a boy show up in haste, sweat running down his forehead. Why, yes, boss. He panted, his hands firmly grasping his knees as he tried to catch his breath. His robe was of a similar style to Raven. However, there were certain design differences that stood out. The most notable of which was how it was color brown instead of Raven's navy blue. His face was round and seemed fairly young. His hazel hair was rather short and glistened in the light from up above, and his emerald green eyes were shaky, staring at the ground. Fatigue was written all over them. You hear that, kid? Boss is another name I'm known by around here. He winked and whispered towards the blankly staring masked man. B boss, did you say something? Indeed. Are you done setting up the books? Yes, boss. 343 books, all sorted and organized in the right order. His voice was shaky yet firm in many other aspects, like a sense of pride. Excellent. I'll be checking that later today. But in the meantime, I have another task for you. He released another puff of smoke from his pipe as he casually flipped to the next page of his book. Yes, of course. I'm ready. Will be some training if I am so bold to ask. His voice bore excitement. Indeed, Raven lightly chuckled confidently as he responded, making the panting man look up with star-like eyes and renewed vigor, almost as though his fatigue was no more. Really? What is it? I'm prepared to do anything. I see. Very well. So, for your task, I'd like you to teach this guy over here how to read and write. And as soon as those words were uttered from Raven's mouth, the vitality and enthusiasm from the brown-haired boy's expression disappeared, instead replaced with a deep disappointment and a rain cloud of depression hovering over his head. Is there a problem, Havel? Are you not satisfied with your task? If you have any gripes, please let me know. Raven's voice was relaxed, yet the shift in attitude from Havel was instant. Oh, no. There is no problem. Good. That's what I wanted to hear. Teaching and learning are two different arts, yet on different sides of the same coin. Your first true task will be to teach this illiterate man how to read and write. Help him in any way you can. To you it might seem tedious, underwhelming, unnecessary even. But trust me, it is something not many know how to do well and might aid you in the future. Yes, boss, I understand. You're right. I am too impatient and got my hopes up too unrealistically. He lowered his head out of respect and calmed his nerves. Now, how long would I need to be his tutor? Until he's fluent. Raven flipped through another page of his book and casually released a puff of smoke from his pipe. Pardon. Havel's eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and his anxiety returned in full. Didn't you hear me the first time? I said until he's fluent. I care not how long it takes. Could be days, weeks, months, or years. As long as he is willing to learn, this will be your task. Understood. Raven lowered his book and witnessed as his words sucked the life out of Havel, seemingly breaking his mind as he tried to fathom what he had just been ordered to do. Yes, sir. You understood. Hey, boy, this is your chance to finally prove yourself to me. This challenge is only as tough as you are. Once you manage to do it, I promise to teach you something special like a new spell. How does that sound? Oh, really? He slowly raised his head and finally met Raven's smiling expression. Indeed, a promise is a promise. And speaking of promises, young Havel, I have something I need you to promise me. Yes, boss. I'm willing to do anything. Havel slightly shook his head and reaffirmed his gaze. Come close. I need to tell you something in private. Understood. Havel lifted his head and slowly strode over towards Raven's desk. From afar, Alucard watched as the two conversed in a tone that even he could not detect. It was only a few words exchanged before they separated, yet they were more than enough to pique his interest. If only he had walked a few steps closer, he was certain to be able to overhear them. Nonetheless, he felt no regret, but instead a great sense of relief. He would not be as a cat would, and allow his curiosity to make him enter forbidden, trouble-prone boundaries. Now both of you leave me be. I have a book to finish. Good luck to you, Havel. I know this will be a long, difficult journey, but I'm certain you can pull through, and good luck to you as well. Alucard. Thank you, Raven. This truly means a lot. Alucard closed his eyes and deeply bowed, receiving a slight nod and a chuckle from the man ahead, who once again lifted his book and read on. When Alucard opened his eyes and stood up straight, he was met with the face of his new, soon-to-be mentor. His mouth was open and his face looked stiff. His expression was rather odd, like he was annoyed and wanted to say something but couldn't bring himself to do it. Sir Havel, I'm ready. Please teach me. Alucard showed him the proper respect and spoke, which seemed to have snapped him out of his daze. Oh yes, Alucard. Please follow me. He took a deep breath and turned his head away, taking the lead as he marched in front, Alucard following him not too far behind. I wonder how that duo will end up. Raven lowered his book as he peered over towards the two figures walking away in the distance before smirking and once again immersing himself in his reading. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. The two men walked around in the vastness of the library. There were many eyes in their direction. Yet, it was to be expected. After all, Alucard was one of a kind, like a shiny Pokemon walking amidst the regulars. Alucard did not have much time to admire the book covers and architecture of the library, as before he knew it, they had already reached their destination. Sit here, I've already picked out a book. Havel sighed and spoke. In front of them was a standard wooden table with two seats adjacently placed. However, that was nothing out of the ordinary. What was truly special was a certain dome surrounding the table. It was a translucent white swirling around, like a white ocean of magic. What's the matter? Walk in. Havel was the one who took the first step, sitting on the table. Alucard was intrigued by the dome of magic ahead of him, so he tested it out with his hands before he fully entered, almost as though there was no barrier there. What? Alucard's eyes grew wide when he set foot in such a space. The obscure, bustling nature of the library was removed and was now replaced with an eerie silence unmatched by any noise-canceling technology of his age. It was quiet, far too quiet in fact. Have you never been in a noise-canceling bubble? Apologies, I have not. How is this made? Is it a spell? Alucard replied. Spell? I suppose so. It's from a magic item embedded in this table. What kind of magic item? Are there tiers to this? Certainly, this is a simple, uncommon grade item. Anyways, enough asking questions. Please take a seat so we can finally begin. Yes, sir. Alucard nodded and took a seat beside Havel, fully prepared for whatever was to come next. Havel lifted his right arm and took out a book, one that was rather thin and light, and slammed it on the table. What kind of book is that? We're going to start all the way from the beginning. This is what's known as a fundamentals book. It's used to teach noble children about their letters, but for our purposes, it will serve more than well. Every word is comprised of letters. Some letters are special, like vowels. They make different sounds depending on the situation. There are 26 letters, and Havel continued to ramble on and on about the basics of a language that were mostly common knowledge for a man such as Alucard. Yet, he had to continue to feign ignorance and listen on. Indeed, there might be new information specific to this world, and he could not expose that he was eloquent in another language. In the end, he was stunned at all the similarities he noticed between English and the language Havel was describing, known as the human tongue, that in fact, as he listened, his zest only grew to finally start learning. Nevertheless, there was still indeed a sizable chunk of information that was quite new to him, information that he now kept fresh and brewing in his mind. That's the basics. Did you get all that, or do you want me to repeat? No need, I fully understood. Very well, Havel sighed. Then let us finally begin. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, finally opening the book placed on the table to the first page where it showed an obscure, swirly symbol that Alucard had never seen in his life, along with a matching picture of what seemed like a fruit just as strange. And thus began Alucard's literary journey in the human tongue. The sun had long set, and the light, once piercing through the glass windows and open door, was replaced by a mellow darkness and the calming silence of the nighttime crickets. This was even reflected by the once bright lights that illuminated the inside almost as though it was day. Now the light of magic torches was sparse and withering away. The once bustling, loud library of Anri was now a ghost of its former self, almost as though it were abandoned. It seemed like nearly everyone had gone home. Yet, there was still one light that shined brighter than the rest. On a wooden table at the rear end of the first floor where one man sat yawning and tapping his feet. What took you so long? I thought you were going out to choose some random books to see how well you can make out the letters. Were you in the bathroom again? Is a bladder okay? Havel looked over to his side as he witnessed the dark shadow of a masked man enter the magic dome surrounding the table. Apologies, teacher. I wasn't in the washroom this time. There were so many interesting books that I had a hard time choosing. Alucard bent his head in apology. So what did you end up choosing then? Havel yawned. One book. Alucard pulled out a book of considerable girth and dropped it flat on the table, causing an audible thud that woke the half-asleep Havel out of his daze. Although, the shock was not as a result of the heavy sound, but by the contents of the book placed in front of him. The book itself seemed rather old and not touched in years. The edges were ripped and the stained pages were not tightly connected. Yet, the picture of the crest it held brought upon a flurry of emotions. The Tales of Legends. Where did you find this? I was looking for a history book, and this one caught my eye most out of all of them. Is it good? He spoke and slowly took a seat back to Havel's side. Yes, it's a great book. It houses many tales of yore. Tales that almost every man knows of the ancient past and foundation of our lands. Havel took a small pause, shaking his dazed head before continuing. Anyways, the content doesn't matter. Some of it is pretty outdated legend anyways. What's important is for your learning. This book is fairly complex, but I think it will more than serve our purpose. Understood. May I begin then? Alucard nodded. You may. Havel gestured, prompting Alucard to finally open the book. The pages were huge, yet the writing was rather meager considering most pages were filled with utterly jaw-dropping, detailed illustrations. At first, Alucard flipped through the pages reading the letters and spelling the words he now recognized. However, it eventually turned into Alucard asking Havel about each of the pictures, which Havel was hesitant, but eventually gave in to explain. It was to the point that Alucard no longer read as he continuously flipped through pages asking questions, like a curious child with no filter reading stories with their parents. They talked about the age of dragons, how the great beasts founded the first countries, and about 12 gods that descended on Earth that ushered in a new age for humanity and put an end to the age of dragons. The 6 demon gods of dark and the 6 great gods of light. At one point, even Havel forgot the purpose of why they were even reading as he continued to explain. To Alucard, his passion on the subject was clear, and his explanations had considerably more passion than that of his other teachings. But none more passionate than when they reached a page with an illustration a single man. Nay, calling such a being a man would have been a disservice. He was akin to that of a great warlord. His shoulders were broad as mountains, and his muscles were protruding heavily from his blackened, fully armored frame. In his hands was a massive, great sword the size of his entire body resting on his right shoulder, and his armored helm had a cold blue light emerging out of them like a trail of magic. As Alucard walked upon the dimly lit, relatively empty stone path towards the guild hall, he could not help but ponder over what had just transpired. Luckily for him, he had a mask on to hide his expressions. If it were not for that, then he didn't think he would be able to keep up his act. Talking to people in such a way was just as taxing as it was annoying in his mind. Of course, all he was trying to do was extract as much information as possible from Havel, and to that end, he was willing to do anything. All things considered, he was a fairly mediocre teacher in his eyes, but considering it was his first time, he wasn't too bad, still certainly the best option he had. To Alucard, he was nothing but a tool. It was a mutual relationship. Havel used him as a tool to get closer to and please Raven, while Alucard used him as a tool to further himself. There was no guilt to be had. On the other hand, Raven himself was a far more interesting man. No matter how he looked at him, he couldn't decipher him at all, nor why a librarian like him would have taken such an interest in a man such as he. When he was outside of Raven's watchful eye, he began acting differently. That was even exemplified as his fatigue took hold of him. He began acting far less professional. It made him wonder why a seemingly simple library assistant, such as Havel, would hold Raven in such a high regard. He shook his tired skull once more, trying to rack his head around what happened, and before he even knew it, he had already reached the foot of the guild hall's lit, swinging doors. There was light shining from the inside along with the sounds of conversations. People are still awake. He wondered as he let himself in. There he saw the now all too familiar sight of the vast guild hall, only it was distinctly cleaner from any other time he could remember. The entrance itself was notably emptier than it has ever been. There were only a few tables occupied, and only some of them were in conversation. The front desk was still fully occupied with staff, looking over towards the few adventurers, while others were cleaning the slight hints of a mess still remaining on the floor. He walked inside and up the stairs and did not notice anything other than the simple look in his direction from both fellow adventurers and staff. It was the first time he felt like he was not the center of attention when entering, which he assumed to be due to the dead state of everyone currently in it. It seems like even these adventurers have their limits when it comes down to late-night celebrations, Alucard thought to himself as he climbed the stairway to the floor above. The hallway leading towards his room was dimly lit with torches, and the sound of heavy snoring was leaking through the closed doors. As Alucard entered his room, he could not help but let out a deep breath before sitting on the table in the corner, leaning back to relax. That was when he noticed hints of knocking coming from the window, and his attention was drawn. Any normal man would have thought it to be the wind, but the still masked, smirking Alucard had something else in mind. "I'm sorry if I was late, my lord. Hope you were not waiting too long." He opened the blinds only to meet a small, flying figure with purple wings. "No need to worry, Luck. You were right on time. So, did you manage to find anything?" Alucard whispered, closing the blinds once again and walked back towards his seat in the near corner, Luck trailing close behind as he spoke. "No, my lord. Past the 5th floor, there was some sort of magic barrier. I couldn't fly past it." "Should have figured." Alucard sighed, slightly disappointed. "Well, Did you find anything of interest in the first 5 floors? I'm afraid not, my lord. I truly found nothing of interest other than books that I could not read nor understand. I'm only proficient in tomes of the fairy tongue, which I found none there to be seen. But as I went up in floors, I believe that there were more books classified as spell books. I see. Well, good work, Luck. That's truly been a help, he smiled, leading to Luck fluttering around in joy. It's me who should be grateful that you let me free and help you instead of staying in the pocket. This makes sense. Havel told me there were no spell books on the first floor. So, the higher the floor, the more complex the spells. I have much to experiment on, whether or not I can both learn this new world magic and my system magic at the same time, and if these key arts are something I could replicate. But in the pursuit of that, I can't get anywhere without one thing. Alucard sat up straight and removed his mask, setting it to the side, revealing his silver hair and piercing crimson gaze. He knew it was going to be a long time since he would need that again. And from under his thick cloak, he pulled out several crumpled paper and set them flat on the table. As they uncrumpled, they revealed what could only be described as writing, only that writing was greatly different from anything the hovering Luck had ever seen. My lord, what is that? Luck asked. This is English, a special language no one of this world knows. Oh wow. Luck gazed in wonder at such foreign yet beautiful text. As expected of my lord. Was this what you were doing in the washroom, and why you took so long? Indeed, I have no need to go there. I just used the time to write notes from what my teacher was saying into words I can understand and refer back to. I'd rather not reveal that I can write in an unknown language. Oh, I see. Luck nodded. But, my lord, sorry if this is not my place to ask, but shouldn't you go to sleep and rest? You worked hard today, and the sun will soon shine. Luck seemed genuinely concerned, yet Alucard could not help but smile at his suggestion. Don't worry, Luck. I'm a vampire. I don't tire like many others do, nor do I need sleep. It will be good practice for me to get used to this new self of this world. I'm going to stay up and study Sleepless for as long as it takes. I'm going to learn this language in no time. Speedrunning has always been my specialty. Alucard organized the papers on his desk in a way that was best for him, and he brought out that book that Havel had lent him and set it on the table. He was fully aware that what he was about to do will be more than challenging, but it must be done in order to break out of his human habits and to further his plans of living in this new world. My lord, what's speedrunning? Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. 3 days had passed since Alucard's first visit to the library, and in those 3 days he had not slept a single time. In the late nights, and when the sun was shining, he could always be found in his room with papers and books in hand, deep into his studies while Luck would be sleeping to rest his living, non-undead self. And when the sun began to set, he would leave the empty guild hall to visit the library once more, where he and Havel would continue their lessons. It was an experience that drained Alucard more than he could ever imagine, not physically, but mentally. His body did not tire, but his mind was not accustomed to working at all times. Still, he persevered, and he felt like the results were more than worth it. He had made much progress in that time. Although he only felt slightly more comfortable in his own body, he now felt comfortable reading the levels of the posted requests on the message boards along with some details, yet not proficient enough to read an entire book. Other than the mental fatigue, there seemed to be one other consequence. He felt his hunger grow exponentially faster. And it was no simple hunger. When he tried to satiate it by hunting animals around the city, he found it to be no use. It was a time that Alucard knew would come, a time of both risk and happiness. It was once again time to consume human blood.